You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Yeah, so
Unless
now
they've emailed you then.
I think you can unsubscribe unless you're interested in the article.
I unsubscribe to emails all the time, and I never feel like I get, unsubscribed.
No? You can unsubscribe.
I feel like you're checking in on me, giving me
It's automatic.
good real estate advice.
I pay heartily for that. Gotta get me business. That's what I need.
Does it work?
What's that?
Does it work?
A lot of people open them because I can see who opens them, and then I can see what articles pique their interest, and it gives me a sense of whether they're looking in the market or not. I mean, we're
My
like,
wife does that stuff all the time. She runs a mailing list to send something out, and it's always like, they opened it, they didn't open it, they unsubscribed.
oh, she can see that?
That constant comment, she can see
Oh, she threw constant contact. Yeah, I do it for Outbound Engine. They do like set up all these articles, and there's like a whole schedule, and then I can see every contact and which one they opened and how often.
click through it.
Yeah, and I don't. The problem is I don't maintain it enough, and you call, you know.
Follow up and everything. Well, you know.
I got a complete mess over here. I don't know how to put these in order.
Okay. Let's see, you don't have Martian stoves, so it's coming, unfortunately.
Okay. All right, so I did the first one, Rogers. I can't find my other Lisa Lane. These are the two. I know. That's minutes.
We'll do the public hearings first, I guess.
Yeah, so these are the two for later.
I think a lot of us, especially growing up in it, I feel like for a variety of reasons, but
That's the old one.
first his favorite radio station.
That's second, right?
It was like, Christian, whatever.
I'm still trying to find the old Lisa Lane. I'm trying to find the old Lisa Lane.
Yeah, did you do 96.9 or 92?
You know, it might be in my bag because I was reading it this week, so I might not even have it. I'll just wing it. And Beacon is, where's the Beacon stuff? Here's the Lisa Lane too. Oh, here's last week's Lisa Lane. There we go. Because the first one's the zone map amendment, right?
Joe? The PDD, master plan amendment.
Yeah, that. And we got the
Yeah, it's looks like a relatively minor mess.
And then this is new Nazo. This I think is old Nazo.
Do you have the legal notice to read?
Yeah, put them over here. Okay, you want to start?
Okay. Henry's got to give me the bill.
Letter into the previous approval.
Peter Henschel.
Okay, that's fine. Great.
School Street. Where's School Street?
Okay. Okay.
Are you all set?
Yeah.
Are we on?
Case, yeah,
Oh, we are.
I thought about it, talked to her.
Okay, is everyone all set to go? We'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. I'll introduce members of the commission and staff. To my far right, Commission Member John Lust. Next to John, Commission Member Joe Chadwick. Next to Joe, Commission Member Joe Viuzzo. Turn the corner, Commission Member Fred Russo. To my left, Commission Member Marcy Pelusi. Our staff this evening, we have Assistant Planner Rich Stecker over here to my far left. Next to Rich is our Town Attorney Danielle Berkery, and next to Danielle is our Town Planner Harry Smith. And I don't see Michelle here this evening, so
She's coming back.
she's coming back, but she will be here. I'm Chuck Andrus, Chair, and I'll ask our Secretary to read the notice of public hearing.
The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of a public hearing to be held on Thursday, September 19th, 2019, at 7 p.m. at the Branford Fire Headquarters, 45 North Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, to consider the following. 1, application 19-8.8, zoning map amendment, a change in zoning designation of an approximately 6,972 square foot portion of property known as Liesel Lane Rear, tax map D07000, block 002, lot 12, from residential R1 to limited business BL. A map depicting the property proposed for a change in zoning designation is on file with the town clerk and filed in the Planning and Zoning Department at Town Hall, 1019 Main Street, Stone Ridge Associates, care of Patricia Owens, applicant. Item number 2, application 19-8.11, site plan modification under CGS Section 830G, Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals for property located at 115 Monterey Street, Parkside Village 1, to modify conditions 5.C and 5.D of the resolution adopted on 6/13/2019, approving application number 19-2.4, and modify the location of the emergency vehicle parking area identified on sheet C 1.07 of the previously approved site plan set, and its depiction on several other sheets of the previously approved site plan set, or alternatively, eliminate the designation and depiction of the emergency vehicle parking area on several sheets of the previously approved site plan set. Beacon Communities Development, LLC, care of Attorney Timothy Hollister, applicant, Town of Branford Housing Authority. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard, and written communications will be received. A copy of the application is on file in the Planning and Zoning Commissioner's office at the Planning and Zoning Department.
Thank you, Marcy. We have 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening. We'll follow our normal format for public hearings. The applicant will go first, make its presentation. After that, we turn it over for a summary of a staff report and questions by the commission and staff of the applicant. At that point, then we will open up to the public. We ask that you come forward, state your name and address for the record, make your comments. And after that, the applicant will have a chance to respond to comments. That's our normal format. We may or may not continue or complete the public hearing depending how it goes. With that, the first public hearing is John Laurel, 92 Rogers Street, a PDD master plan amendment. Harry, are you going to present that one?
I am. There's a lot of process for a very small item, unfortunately. And looking at this request, which essentially was a request to enlarge a deck on one of these condominium units, this is a little project off of Rogers Street as you come down from the church, going down the hill on the right. There's a little lollipop piece of pavement and a number of condominium units off it. It was approved as a planned development district apparently several years ago. That file contained a master plan that showed everything with respect to the construction of each of these condominium units, including the decks at the back of them. So in order for this gentleman to expand his deck, because it's actually chiseled into the master plan, he has to go through the public hearing process and get approval as a master plan amendment to add to his deck. I did propose a condition for you to consider, which would allow these minor adjustments should anyone else in the development wish to enlarge their deck, so they wouldn't have to come to the commission to make a full-blown application. I'd also request that you consider waiving the requirement for the submittal of an actual site plan. Fortunately for this gentleman, he knew the person, the engineer, had prepared the original drawing and received his permission to modify this drawing and submit it. But I don't think an actual site plan is warranted for this tiny 10-foot by about 5-foot deck expansion. So staff would recommend approval, and would recommend approval with the condition on the front of the staff report.
Thank you, Harry. Questions from commission members? If not, we open up to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? One more time, does anyone wish to comment? Seeing none, I think we can close this matter as a public hearing, and we can probably take this up later on this evening. That brings us to number 2, our second public hearing, which is Stone Ridge Associates, Patricia Owen, applicant and owner, Liesel Lane zoning map amendment from R1 to BL. See applicant ready to proceed on that one?
It is, Your Honor. It is. Carl Porto, Prep Porto, Preci, and Quo, representing the applicant, along with Jim Ferretti from Piscoral Engineering. Good evening, everyone. We're here this evening on actually 3 relatively small matters as well, although and they are somewhat interlinked, but the first one on the agenda this evening is a zoning map amendment, and what we're proposing is our client owns 3 Liesel Lane. That used to be, I think, the Byrider automobile facility, which is now out of business. Has been purchased by a group that is affiliated with the Connecticut Orthopedic Specialists, which, as I'm sure everyone aware, has a large operation at 84 North Main. And this is going to become an extension of their operation. It's ultimately become a physical therapy center. So it'll be no longer automotive in any respect. And just generally speaking, as I mentioned to staff, because the applications are a little bit combined, we expect no footprint changes. This is essentially an interior renovation and some improvements to the exterior. And I'll turn it over to Jim in a second, but what we are doing is, immediately to the rear of the property is the Stone Ridge apartment complex owned by the Owens and Anderson families, and we have proposed to acquire about, and it was read into the record, about 7,000 square feet of property from that project and annex it to this one, which will help our parking a little bit and our impervious coverage ratio a little bit. We don't expect any significant changes in that area. And then with that, I'll turn it over.
Good evening. Jim Preddy, School Engineer. As you can see on the plan here, the property that we're talking about, 3 Liesel Lane, is here. The Stone Ridge apartment unit is this larger piece here. They're looking to purchase that just under 7,000 square foot piece. The existing R1 BL line goes right against the back property line of the 3 Liesel Lane piece. We're looking to, the piece that we're purchasing, we'd like to change it to BL, part of the 3 Liesel Lane piece. The only parent property that's affected is the Stone Ridge Apartments, and we're selling the piece to us. So, in effect, what's in a larger scale, this is, again, the 3 Liesel Lane piece that was J.D. Byrider. The existing pavement had gone on to that piece already when the car dealership was here. So when we did the survey, we discovered that they had been actually using a part of the Stone Ridge property already. They made a deal to buy that piece, which helps with pervious surface coverage also, because there's some wooded area in the back. But again, this is the piece we're looking for this first of 3 applications that we're having deal with the same item.
Thank you.
That's what we have relative to this particular application.
Okay, so this is the zoning map change
Yes.
at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Rich, did you do the staff report on this?
Yes, I did. So there are 3 pieces to this. Again, this is the zoning map change from R1 to BL. And with that, you need to take a look at various things in terms of district standards, abutting zones, adjacent frontage properties along North Main to the east and across the street are zoned BL. Frontage properties to the west along North Main continue to be zoned R1 due to the existence of pre-existing residential properties and institutional uses like fire headquarters. The recently approved Plan of Conservation and Development looked at some things about having to do with that area or some of the emerging medical office clinic use clusters near exit 54 were thought to be good growth patterns there. According to the studies of the South Central region, the business sectors that were found to be most economically viable and are considered to be economic development priorities include healthcare, biotech, and life sciences. This does, make for a satellite office for the physical therapy across the street, and also gets to clean up a site with some practical landscaping, lighting concerns, and by changing the map amendment to BL, the existing parking in the back was able to be utilized, and so it's more than what is required, but not too much more. So we referred, didn't need any referrals to the South Central Regional Council of Governments. So really, it's the approval commission must find that it's considered in the plan of conservation and development, and that its decision is in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which is the zoning regulations and map. And the effective date for the zoning map amendment would automatically be set for the 16th day after the commission votes to approve a zoning map amendment, unless the commission picks a different day. So I think everything was checked off in terms of getting all the notifications out, 500 feet for the owners and 100 feet for just notification of the map amendment. So I think
So I guess the bottom line is.
bottom line, we'll get to the bottom line. Planning and Zoning Commission, this is staff recommendation. Planning and Zoning Commission has considered the plan of conservation development in its review of the zoning map amendment and finds it consistent with the plan of conservation and development. And the Planning and Zoning Commission finds the zoning map amendment also in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which is the zoning map and the zoning regulations. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Rich. Questions from commission members?
Were the condominiums developed under a PDD?
I don't believe so, but I'm not sure of that. Do you know, Rich?
Yeah, they were not. No, they weren't.
Do we
No.
need an amended map from them for that development? No?
I don't think
No.
so, no.
Does the natural grade, because as I recall, those condos are up on a hill. I'm assuming the toe of the slope is about where this back property line is?
Just, yeah, I mean, the tree line, the edge of the 2 minutes now, there's a fence there, and there's pretty dense trees. It goes in not very far.
And then it starts to, so it's a natural geographic separation between the two uses.
Ms. Prater, you indicated that the area that you're seeking to rezone and which would be conveyed to the property owner, that is actually used by the former property owner as parking now? Was that correct? Or?
Yes, this, the piece that we're talking about, I'm not sure that anybody realized it wasn't part of the property, so I'm certain. They had been historically using it to park cars there for the business. So originally, we had come up with a line just off the back pavement, and when we met with staff, the suggestion was that the piece that we're buying should be at 60% impervious coverage before we added to the front piece. So the line got moved a little bit. The apartment owners were amenable to that, so that's how we got to this shape. But yeah, basically, we're just trying to add the property that had been historically used by this property.
So the open, or the impervious area that's created by the new parcel increases the overall percentage? Or decreases the overall percentage of
So by
it?
itself, this
Is
is
at
at
60.
60%, but when it gets added to here, it reduces it. It reduces the overall from 90% down to just under 80%.
So that's an improvement.
A little more than 10% reduction by adding that. Plus, we're doing some other things that we're going to during site plan.
Right, but it's an improvement of the pervious coverage, and it falls on the natural geographic division of the grade.
Seems to make sense, it moves in the right direction.
Right.
And the other zone is residential, it's R1? And is there any coverage or impervious standards in the R1 zone? I mean,
We did look at the apartment piece, the Stone Ridge piece.
Right.
We did analysis for steep slopes to move out of the property going at about 10. So this property won't, this
It's a
piece we're
mic.
taking off won't really affect.
Okay, so conveying this doesn't make that other property non-conforming?
No, not at all.
Right, okay.
The closest building's almost 100, it's 80 feet away or something, almost 100 feet away.
Great.
I don't know if Rich mentioned that, but he did review that and confirms that, right, in the staff report.
Great. Okay, any other questions? Any member of the public wish to comment? One more time, any member of the public wish to comment on this item? If not, I think we can close this matter as a public hearing, and again, we understand there's related applications later on, but,
Thank you.
okay, we can probably take it up. That brings us to item number 3, which is the Beacon application. Beacon Communities. This is a visitor that's been before us a number of times. I will remind everyone that this is an application under Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. What that means is that in the event of a denial or appeal with conditions that the applicant is unsatisfied with, and there is an appeal, that it would be the burden of the commission to show that any decision that it makes is supported by substantial interests in public health and safety and other matters which the commission can reasonably consider, that those interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing, and that they cannot be addressed by reasonable changes in the plan. Just so we've said that in the past, but just want to remind everyone about that. And I understand this, there is actually litigation present, and I'll turn it over to the applicant. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. I'm Attorney Tim Hollister, joined by my colleague Andrea Gomes and Attorney Jay Pottinger, representing the applicants. Proof of mailing was provided to Mr. Smith. And let me start by saying that the goal tonight is to be done once and for all with the Commission's review of the Parkside redevelopment. As much as we have enjoyed our visits here over 2 years, we're anxious to let someone else join in the fun. But more seriously, we hope to resolve the one remaining issue regarding the June 13th conditions of approval, withdraw the court appeal, and move on. So the materials that make up our application at this point are the August 26, 2019 application package, the narrative package, and the plan set, and then tonight's very brief handout. And I would also say that in response to a memo that we got yesterday from Fire Marshal Heffernan, we have ready to file tonight one very slight revision of the so-called emergency pullover, and Mr. Sacco from TPA can explain that when we get to that portion. So by way of background, what we have is a set of resolved conditions from the process between when we were here on June 13th and today. On June 13th, as you recall, you acted on the application, which I believe had been filed in February, and there were a couple of conditions that simply were not made available ahead of time. We saw them for the first time after they had been adopted, and they were unclear in several respects. So in a June 21 letter, we asked for clarification. The clarifications were provided by Attorney Berkery on August 14th. And with that clarification, as stated in the application before you, the applicants are prepared to accept, as written, conditions 2A, 2B, 2N, 2R, and 5E. And as I have also represented to Attorney Berkery, that we will also be prepared to withdraw those paragraphs from the court appeal that we had to file in order to preserve the situation as it existed in early July. I will also repeat what I said in writing, which is that we don't think it's necessary for the commission to rewrite the conditions to incorporate Attorney Berkery's letter. We are content that the that letter, the August 14th letter, be made part of the record, essentially an attachment to the June 13 approval resolution as an available reference, and I think, I don't think we need any more in order to move forward with those clarifications. So what is left is conditions of approval 5C and 5D. The June 13th resolution with regard to those two conditions asks for a recorded deed restriction to ensure that the emergency vehicle pullover area, which is located at the northwest property boundary, and remember, that is the property boundary that would result from the trading of the land parcels intended to accommodate the Little League field and resolve an historical anomaly in the way that property lines were drawn. But with that area would be maintained and never modified without approval from the fire marshal, the police chief, and the commission. And the August 14 explanation proposed, or said that the proposed use of town property for the pullover area required this deed restriction, which would require approval from the Branford representative town meeting. Now, being perfectly candid and perhaps also perfectly obvious, we do not wish to go to the RTM. It is a political body. It is not a land use agency. The history, of course, is that the RTM turned down the so-called Melrose access, even though the applicants had offered that voluntarily as an accommodation and envisioned it as a win-win for the town and the public's use of Sliney Fields. But frankly, after the June 13th condition was adopted, a member of the RTM, who I don't need to identify, expressed the view that one of the purposes was to get the matter back in front of the RTM and not to approve it. So we respectfully do not wish to participate in that process for several reasons, which I will go through. I'd also point out that I just don't think it's realistic for anyone to suggest that every fire lane on private property requires a deed restriction that requires approval from the legislative body. The commission would have to review the entire town of fire lanes if that were the case. And as also stated in our written materials, a requirement to go to the RTM in this situation simply would not meet the standards of Section 830G. So let me put the RTM issue aside and just state the basic principle of our application. The deed restriction for the emergency pullover is simply not necessary. All that is needed to achieve the stated purpose is a site plan condition along the lines stated in the cover letter of our August 26th application, and I'll just read that. It's on page 3. So in lieu of conditions 5C and 5D as written in June, we would propose the following. Quote, the building and physical modifications to the area shown as the emergency vehicle pullover and other Phase 1 improvements on sheet C103A, as well as any temporary measures within this area that would in any way impede access by emergency service personnel and vehicles, may not be modified without the approval of the commission after consultation with the fire marshal and the town police chief in a form and content acceptable to the fire marshal and the town council, meaning the town attorney. Site plan conditions have the force of law. They are completely enforceable by the commission and its zoning enforcement officer. The fire marshal had given us a memo yesterday that expresses a concern about, quote, structures, fences, playgrounds, and other impediments, unquote. Well, that's, number one, it's speculation, but the real point is that there's nothing that we can do or the town can do or the Recreation Association or the Parks Department can do without the approval of this commission and the fire marshal and the police chief. So we believe the site plan condition is a complete answer. So as a result of everything I've just said, we are essentially asking the commission to consider one of three options for tonight. The first is to leave the site plan as is and revise the text of 5C and 5D as I just suggested in the paragraph that I read. Second option is to try to eliminate the issue by revising the site plan to move the pullover completely onto the Parkside property, so that there's no use of town property, no deed restriction. So this sheet is the existing, blue is the pullover, so you can see it's off the adjusted property line. This is the way we submitted it on August 26th with the pullover pulled back completely. Oh, thank you. With the pullover completely pulled back onto the Parkside property. And then tonight, in response to the fire marshal's memo of yesterday, we have proposed a revision that basically makes it a longer and slightly wider. I believe the square footage difference is essentially minimal, but it's still on the Parkside property. And I just want to briefly ask Mr. Sacco to explain what the consequences are of that further modification that we're proposing tonight.
David Sacco, TPA Design Group, New Haven, Connecticut. In response to the fire marshal's memo, we revised the pullover area to be wider and longer so that there's sufficient room for the vehicle to be located with the outriggers fully deployed. We have included a turning analysis to show that the vehicle can move smoothly in without extensive maneuvering as well as out. We've got copies of this that we'll provide to the Commission this evening. The net outcome is that we lose a little bit of tenant amenity space behind the building, but there is no other significant impact to the development. And the third sheet shows the driving pattern of the truck being able to pull directly in and park, establish the outriggers, and then pull forward out of the space when it needs to. Thank you. Yes, we have full-size sets that we can provide.
I would again emphasize that the difference in the square footage that we're talking about is somewhere on the order of 14 square feet. This is not a major change in terms of the size of the area. I've given you in tonight's package a memo from our fire safety consultant, Mr. Versteeg, who said that pulling the pullover back onto Parkside land does not impact or create any difficulties for firefighting. I mean, again, the distances are essentially minimal. Respectfully, the fire marshal's memo says that, reiterates that a deed restriction is necessary. With all due respect, I think that's beyond his purview and authority. As we've also noted in our written materials, as to Sliney Road and the rest of the site, there's no need for any additional restriction or enforcement because under state statutes, fire trucks can drive anywhere they want. Over lawns, they can push cars out of the way, and certainly, and not to be flip, but fire truck drivers don't check the land records or easements when they're responding to an emergency. Finally, I'd point out that as to Parkside's land, this issue of so-called temporary obstructions is covered by conditions 2A and 2B, and we have in condition 2E agreed to grant a full easement of public access across the portion of Sliney Road that is on the Parkside property, so that should not be an issue. So we're trying to resolve the one issue of the portion of the pullover being shown on town property by moving it, either leaving it in place if I've convinced you that the moving is unnecessary, or moving it onto Parkside property and eliminating the issue. So that is our presentation, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hollister. First, I'll turn it over to staff. Harry, did you prepare a staff report on this?
I did. You should have it at your places, so it's distributed tonight. I understand the copy was provided to the applicant, is that correct?
I do not have a
You
copy.
do not have a copy.
I have the fire marshal's memo, but not yours. Thank you.
This is a short preliminary staff report. Some of the content's already been covered. The first page describes the changes proposed in this application. The previous approval noted some of the considerations about Section 830G, which has already been stated by the chair. And below that, I recited some information about affordable housing that currently exists in Branford that is not on the Affordable Housing Appeals list that I've submitted previously with other prior applications. With respect to comments on the site plan changes themselves, they really are very minimal. They changed the grading plan slightly. My understanding from reviewing it, though I'll confirm this with the town engineer, is that the 3-on-1 slope requirements maintained with the increased indentation of that proposed parking area and one of the options of the site plan amendments proposed. We did not receive, as we had in previous applications, a coastal site plan application or an amendment to it. I'm not sure one is required. However, possibly the applicant would like to cover that base and identify why that's not needed. I mean, it makes sense. This is really, from that viewpoint, a minimal application in terms of modifications to the prior site plan that has been approved. And attached at the end is the information on affordable housing, as well as a copy of the fire marshal's letter, which you should have already received on the separate cover. So I will let that speak for itself and not comment on that any further. Just to note, though, that of course, was prepared prior to the modified site plan that was just discussed and distributed to you, as well as the additional comments from Mr. Versteeg. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commission members? I'll have a couple questions. The issue, I understand it, is emergency access. There is a primary access on one side, but you need the secondary access to get to the whole building, and that's coming up through Sliney. And part of the problem is that the access way into Sliney, and where the trucks would normally go when they drive in there, goes over, looks like the access way would require a truck to go at least over some of the town property. And then the pullover area was partially located on the town property. And what I understood, one of the objections of the fire marshal, it's sort of, it's a simple thing. I think it's the town or another property owner owns that land. And you need that land to be maintained open for access way for emergency vehicles. And that is not your property, it's someone else's property. So we need some guarantee that the owner of that property will allow that to stay open. That's the gist of what I understood it to be.
Right.
And what I'm not wholly clear about is whether the access way, because of the reconfigured boundaries, and I know there's some land swap involved in this, the reconfigured boundaries, just to get into the site, do the fire vehicles need to go over town property? And is that an issue? Because what I understand the gist of that to be that do you have authority to require property that you don't own to remain unobstructed? And it happens to be owned by the town, and the town may or may not want to do that, to allow that. But that's what I understand to be sort of the gist of the issue, both in the pullover and in the access. And I saw his comments at the end about making obstructions on the area, and for all I know, that's right. I think most people can put a fence on their property line if they wanted to. And the question would be if I don't know, maybe the town conveyed it to the Little League, and the Little League, because it's not necessarily who the owner is, but it's a owner. If the town gave it to some other entity and they wanted to put a fence on the property line, and then you have a fire, would the fire truck be able to get in there all on your property, both in the access way and in the pullover area? That's my understanding as to what the concern is about getting into there. Am I missing something?
Well, I think it's a little narrower than that. The condition that we're concerned about specifically speaks to the emergency vehicle pullover, the actual bump out, if you will. We're here because even though we don't agree with the idea that this requires a deed restriction in RTM approval, we're here to try to solve the problem by pulling the pullover completely onto the Parkside property. Then it's completely within our power to grant the town whatever rights we want. Then the second issue is, does this need a deed restriction, or is an enforceable site plan condition a complete answer? And our belief is that the site plan condition, which explicitly says we can't put up a fence, we can't do anything that would permanently or temporarily interfere with the fire truck pulling down Sliney Road and pulling over into that pullover. We cannot interfere with that without the approval of the fire marshal, the police chief, and this commission, and we are in complete agreement to that type of condition.
And I certainly understand that with respect to your own property, a site plan condition that you can't do it certainly is proper. And I thought the issue was insofar as on your site plan, you're putting restrictions on property you don't own, whether, that it's got to stay either as pavement or that you can't, it has to be available for staging of a fire or whatever. And I understand what you're saying is, no, we can move it over there and get it all on your property. But I guess one of the questions that I have still is it simply the issue of the pullover, or is it also the access way itself?
Okay, and our response is it's only the issue of the pullover, A, because that's what your condition says, but second, fire trucks can drive anywhere. They don't need an easement from the town, from Parkside, and they can drive over the front lawn, they can push cars out of the way, and, as to the fire lane along Sliney Road that is on the Parkside property, there's signage there. That's basically just traffic management, no parking signs to make sure that the width is maintained for fire trucks. But that doesn't require an easement, and if it did, think about the implications for the entire town. There are fire lanes on private property, all over town, and in every town. And that it cannot be that each one of those fire lanes needs an easement, and if there's no easement, the fire trucks can't drive on it. That's simply not a valid way to describe the state of the world.
So you're characterizing existing Sliney Road as a fire lane?
Well, it's marked on the site plan as being striped and signed as a fire lane.
On your property?
Right, on our
Right.
property.
Yeah, and I understand it. Yeah, you can say it's designated as a fire lane and whatever, but I still have that question about the access on the property that you don't own, and whether that's necessary. That's the issue. And I understand fire trucks can go anywhere, and I get that. I don't think the fire chief disputed that. But I understood the fire chief to raise, that's what, in the last paragraph, you can't stop, I guess, and I don't know if the zoning commission could stop someone from putting a fence if it's under 8 feet tall or so. They could put a fence on the fire line, on the property line.
No, well, that has two sides to it. Number one, we are agreeing we won't do it.
Right,
And we
I
are also
understand.
agreeing we won't allow anyone else to do it.
Sure, but is it necessary, but where the property line is, do they have to access the site? Does the fire engine have to go onto town property to serve it correctly? That's my question.
Well,
And-
and number one, Mr. Versteeg has, as a matter of record, has said previously, it doesn't matter, but we are willing to indulge that assumption. And the fire truck, once it goes across that, the property line between the end of Sliney Road and onto the town property, again, the fire truck can go anywhere it wants. It doesn't matter if we said, if there was an easement or not an easement, the fire truck can go where it wants.
No, and I understand that, yeah, I think we're just kind of circling, but nothing is to stop a property owner from putting a fence, and then the fire truck would have to knock down the fence to get there. That's kind of what.
That's not the application that's before you. We're agreeing to a condition of approval that on paper will not allow that to happen.
On your property, I understand that.
Well,
Right.
we can make the condition that if anybody proposes it on town property, we will not allow that to happen to the extent that we can intervene and prevent that. Excuse me, I have the floor, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Marcy.
Obviously, there's, you can use town property to pull in an emergency. It may or may not be clear depending on the use of Sliney Field. But, I look at this map and I can see all the boulders that are already there without this to indicate stay off the grass, because there's a parking issue of everybody going onto the grass and everybody trying to cut through to Melrose. So I know turning radiuses, I've worked with them. You come in, are you telling me that you're gonna back the fire truck out after an emergency? Because I don't see that fire truck being able to do a K-turn in that immediate area if there's any kind of function going on
Okay.
at that time.
Commissioner,
So
well, Commissioner, that's not what we're here to talk about 5C and 5D, which doesn't say anything about turning radii.
well, I feel like I'm being asked to approve and acknowledge something that has myopically been trying to make the conditions work, and I'm just looking at the reality. And the reality is, the fire truck needs to get in there safely and get out of there safely, and you're asking me to force 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag to get this approved when it doesn't function well. If the Melrose access was there, now you have an exit that the fire truck can, as of right, go onto. But I don't see how the fire truck is going to come in and turn around. I would have liked to have seen the building shortened up, the turn cut into the area on the property so it can just go in one way and out the other. I mean, I can see other solutions to this corner, but I don't see them being presented. I see, let's just get it approved. I don't see a solution that works in the real world for this being proposed.
the
And
fire
maybe
mar-
that's legal-wise not,
Well,
where we're at, but.
The fire marshal gave a memo yesterday in which he was very detailed. He didn't raise any of the issues that you're talking about now. And I would just reiterate, we came here to address the issue of, do we need a deed restriction in addition to a site plan condition in order to make this permanently enforceable, to make sure the fire truck can pull into the pullover? We're offering to provide that as a condition, and that's the problem, the one problem that we came here to solve, because that's the only problem that's raised by the conditions. Now, I just don't think we can reopen the issues that, which we've been here 2 years, and to my knowledge, I don't recall that coming up. So,
Well, that's because this access and this pullover was given to us
But we haven't-
as a reactionary measure to the RTM not approving the Melrose access.
But
Did
moving
it
the
go back
pullover-
and look at the whole picture again for what you now were dealing with to get fire access? That's where my disappointment is, because I know there's other solutions, and you didn't give them to us.
moving the pullover doesn't affect that issue one way or the other.
Moving whether the pullover is on property or not, and I have an issue with using town property, but my bigger concern is getting the fire truck out of there as much as getting it in there, and the parking I know that happens there. So I feel like I'm being asked to approve a deed restriction to create an unsafe condition. And, in my purview, I'm in charge of the health, welfare, and safety of, my constituents.
It's not a deed restriction. We're asking to eliminate the request for a deed restriction, but I'd also point out the fire marshal reviewed this plan and didn't raise any issue about fire trucks turning around or any of the other things that you're raising now. So, at some point, we have to rely on the experts for what they think is and is not a problem. And by the way, remember that the pullover is just striping on a pavement. It doesn't change the geometry or turning radii or anything. It's just where we're going to pave it as opposed to having grass.
Well, exactly, and there's not a lot of room, and I don't, I'd like to see conditions about enforcing the parking and enforcing that, it's a fire access. And I still contend close Sliney Road then, if that's what you need to control the access, because I don't think it's a manageable,
Okay.
I don't think this as presented is a manageable solution, unfortunately.
Okay, well,
But I'll
certainly,
keep my peace,
on
I'm
that
sorry.
point, you've spoken about
Yeah.
that at previous meetings, and
So,
we have moved on.
Any other questions from,
Just for clarification, I'd like to hear from Mr. Sacco again, because I believe if I heard him correctly, he said he studied the radius of the fire trucks driving in and getting into that space, and I'd like to hear from him whether or not the fire truck has to drive on town property to get into this pullover.
and out, please. And how they get out, I'd like to know.
Well, the fire marshal never brought that up, but yeah, I understand, yeah.
Yeah, the figure that is part of the package that's been submitted does depict that the truck is crossing a corner of town property between Sliney Road and the pullover in order to get into the pullover, yes.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Why don't we open up to the public? Any members of the public wish to comment? Sure, come on up. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. Damian Plottish in South Montewies. Thanks again for your attention and your service. I know this has been a long process for you, and we appreciate it all. To be clear, the neighborhood strongly felt that the health and public safety concerns we cited for the board could not be resolved by reasonable accommodations, and they strongly outweighed the need for public housing, although other concerns did not carry the day. However, some of them were adopted as conditions for approval. The problem from us has always been that we can't fight Goliath where David without a slingshot, whereas they have Shipman and Goodman, we have Google to do our legal research, where they have Alfred Bennick for traffic reports are out there with tape measurers and trying to take traffic counts with stopwatches, whereas they have Verstees for a fire expert. We have to rely on our town fire marshal for our fire expertise. And as if that armada wasn't big enough, they somehow engaged Yale University Law School to fight on behalf of this for-profit developer over what we believe to be something that's putting our most vulnerable citizens at risk. Now, we couldn't do this because we couldn't pay for the tab. We have no doubt that had we hired a traffic expert, we could have contradicted Bennick. Had we hired a fire expert, we could have contradicted Versteed. Had we hired a blasting expert, they could have said that the proposition by Attorney Hollister to stand 6 feet away from a blast zone is probably not a good idea. We couldn't do that because we're paying taxes. The same taxes that fund this town, the same taxes, federal taxes, are going to be used to fund this project as it is proposed for this for-profit developer, albeit we'll be looking for a pilot down the road. I think everyone here can agree this was the wrong project, the wrong place for this project, and it would never have been approved were it not for the 830G laws. So let me cut to some of the points I wanted to make. Given its current configuration, the Sliney Road access in such close proximity to Indian Neck and South Montewies Street is an absolute traffic hazard. Beacon agreed with that. We know it was initially proposed as a footpath, and they couldn't get the Melrose access, and now they're proposing to strip the trees, double the size of the road, and they're having these issues with fire truck access. And as it was alluded to earlier, this board actually discussed shutting down Sliney Road, putting up balusters that are lockable, that are only open during fire incidents. So I took it upon myself again, a couple of weekends in a row now, to walk down to that intersection to where Sliney Road exits onto South Montewies Street. And I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing there, but I was counting cars, I was looking at the traffic patterns, and I noticed, it finally struck me on this last Saturday. I was out there from about 10, 10:40 to about 11 a.m., counted close to 100 cars. The cars are simply not stopping at those stop signs. And it took me a while to see it. I counted a handful. Now, they are backing up 4 or 5 deep toward that left turn coming out of Sliney Field is a problem because we were backing up at that stop sign and you can't get out because of those cars that are there. Now, that is a public safety issue. That's why in times of fire or access to those roads, it's just a horrible place to have this secondary access. Now, let me just catch up for a quick second. So their response of this, no emergencies, the point of that is people are not following the rules. People are not following the law. They are not stopping at a stop sign. That's breaking the law, shocking. Now, the response to either eliminate this emergency parking or carve out another 20 by 60 foot area, that's pretty big. That's the size of a residential mobile home, at least a single wide home. Impacts on the grade, impacts on coastal access, on the impermeable land, additional trees. I looked at it, but it's hard for me to look at this map, not being an engineer, and trying to decipher what exactly is being proposed and how that's going to impact the open space. When I hear reduction of open space, that causes me concern. And again, I'll reiterate it again, not counting 95 and Route 1, South Monterey East is the most dangerous road in town, as you have the information, the last 4 years, by far the most accidents, and number 4 was, of course, the Snake Hill, which has been resolved at this point. And again, the point of this is, in times of need, people are going to park in ball fields, or when balls are going on, when there's picnics, when there's parties going on, they're going to park wherever they want, as evidenced by the fact that they're not stopping at that stop sign. They're going to park up and down whether there's fire signs saying do not park or not. And that's why we need deed restrictions and we need restrictive covenants. It's funny to me when I hear Beacon speak, they love restricted covenants and deeds when it benefits them. When it comes to 830G, they love deed restrictions. We know in this town, as Harry Smith has pointed out, 45% of our housing stock is affordable by the calculation in the law. However, it doesn't reach that 10% deed restriction threshold because of the amount of rental property in town. So they love that deed restriction. However, when it comes to public safety, a deed restriction for vehicle access and for fire, oh, no, we don't like deed restrictions. So again, when it works for them to make money, they want the deed restriction. When it's a matter of public safety, they don't want the deed restriction. It's hypocrisy. So folks, as you're hinting at, the whole problem here is that this massive development is simply too small for the acreage on which it has been put on. And that's where all issues are stemming back from. And they need town property to make it work. And we're here to say, do not give town property to a for-profit developer that's going to impact the most needy folks in our town. Think safety, think safety. Please, I have the floor, please. Think safety, think safety, think safety. They got their conditional approval, keep those conditions as they are. Perhaps spending $26 million of taxpayer money, $435,000 plus per unit is not a good idea. Imagine we could do just 1% of that. Imagine just having $5,000 per unit. Make it 2%, $10,000. How we could fix that property as it stands right now. Keep those deed restrictions where they are. Keep those conditions where they are. And we thank you for your attention. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Next, who else? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Hi, my name is Barbary Whalen, and I'm a resident at 115 South Monterey Street, Parkside Village 1. And I am a senior, and I have a disability. I only have one leg, but it's a nice one. But as far as we're bringing up public health and safety, they have not even disclosed to us where they're going to relocate us during the building. We have not seen any plans because Branford Housing Association had a meeting and decided they didn't have to show us anything, according to Beacon. And Merit Properties has done nothing to take care of this place, unless we insist on it. When I moved in there, I asked them, please, to trim all the trees that they let grow around the walkway. And fine, it took them a while, but they got it done. But the building just needs some TLC, that's all. And, we are not necessarily happy about having to move somewhere and then be moved again. If I get put down below the hill, I can't get up to the community center to do my laundry. And, things like this, I wouldn't even be able to get my mail. And they don't take any senior suggestions into mind. None of us want to move. We're happy where we are. We don't, as a representative will tell you, for people who put in, who's here, and there are a lot of residents here that want to speak, and we don't want this new crap. We're happy where we are. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Anyone else? Yes, sir?
Good evening. Todd Petrowski, 67 South Montague Street. I just want to actually give you guys some praise tonight because you changed my mind about my speech I was going to give, and I would still think you guys deserve the respect of the question being answered. What if the town puts up a cement wall on that property line tomorrow? He can't tell you what we can and can't do. We've had a meeting with Mr. Smith, myself, Mr. Perricone, and Mr. Plowdish. He said we could do whatever we want on our property. So I would like to have you answer, if you may, what would you do if tomorrow we put up a cement wall on that property line? Please answer. Floor is yours.
Well, they'll have an opportunity once everyone has spoken.
All right. So that I would, no disrespect. Number two is this whole thing is sad because we had the chance to get rid of this thing a long time ago, and unfortunately he's not here, but Mr. Cosgrove dropped the ball numerous times, and I wish he was here so I could say it to him in person. April of 2018, a petition went in to remove Doug Dennis. He was afraid to remove him based on a lawsuit, which is funny to me because Connecticut is an at-will state, whether you're employed or not, and it's laughable. That was the excuse. He let him stay on past his term long enough to re-sign a 3-year contract with Beacon. We shouldn't even be here right now. They should be gone. Contract was up. He kept him on, removed him too far too late, puts a new chairman in who's here tonight who's going to speak and tell you the problems he's having with Merritt and everyone else. And it's just ridiculous. The excuses from him are ridiculous. When you talk to him, he goes, we just want Beacon to go away. How's it going to go away if you don't push him to go away? That's like saying I got cancer. I just want it to go away, but I'm not going to do any chemo. It's just a ridiculous statement. We talked to Harry. He said we could put up a fence. We go talk to Mr. Cosgrove about the fence. Same 3 gentlemen. The excuses again. Well, there's teachers that need to park back there. 3 people park in the back. There's 40 spots in front of that school. It's an irrelevant red tape excuse once again for whatever his agenda is. Then it turns on to, well, there may be an agreement with Parkside about using that, which is another excuse because it's a nonprofit property. If that was the case, we could have taken the ball field over years ago under squatters' rights because we maintained it. I'm sure our town attorney was smart enough to know what squatters' rights are. So it's just excuses after excuses. And personally, he's 100% to blame if these people lose their homes. And I'm a Republican, registered, and I'm embarrassed by what's going on here. Number 2, Diana Ross. We asked her to come out and do a study. Blatant refusal. Nope, I'm not coming out. Pay for it yourself. Mrs. Sires goes in her pocket, $2,500, comes up with a study out of Cheshire. They find vernal pools. They find endangered species. Now, all of a sudden, she wants to get involved. And this is the second time her name's been with negative in our town, a whole nother issue, which I'm sure everyone knows about. And now this, still keeps her job. Blatant insubordination. But no one enforces any rules here. So after that, our fire marshal sends a letter over with 5 bullet points, which you guys got: the safety of parking, And I don't care what the law says or what Connecticut says, 1.25 parking spaces per unit. So in the other quarter, what are you supposed to park your trunk and then the rest of the car? There's 67 units with 84 spots. Where are the people going to park? He said it's a safety concern. Maybe it fell on deaf ears, maybe the blinders were on. But the bottom line is this access road is going to have the parking where Sliney Field is. You're not going to have parking for the kids and the parents to go to the games because it's going to be taken up over the overflow. People aren't going to walk 100 yards with groceries into their apartment. It's not going to happen. And then, I mean, you guys, I understand it's an 830G, but we've raised enough issues with safety. I mean, Bo just said it. We don't want to leave. People have disabilities. They don't want to leave. They were never told. Doug ran that place into the ground, kept them living in fear, and now they actually have somebody new who's helping them, and they're actually able to speak their voice. Mary Ann Hall was a representative at the time, went down there in the 5th District. You know what she got for her efforts to talk to these people? She got the cops called on her for trying to find out what these people really think. That's what, that place was ran worse than a prison. And it's, I mean, she could come back up and tell you. And I mean, I appreciate the fact that I had a lot more I was going to say about you guys, but you know what? Thank you for sticking to your guns with the question. And I think you should still ask the question because it hasn't been answered yet. What if the town puts up a wall tomorrow? What happens to this project? And I think you deserve the respect of an answer here tonight before you even consider voting on it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, yes, sir.
Hello, my name is James Kavanaugh. I'm a resident of Parkside 1. I'm also the president of the Parkside Resident Association. I'll try to stick to script tonight because I don't want to make any mistakes. Change is a especially difficult thing for older people. Change is apprehension-filled, and it is with such apprehension that I reported a change in the Resident Association's position relative to redevelopment. Previously, the association supported redevelopment of Parkside primarily due to the health and safety benefits. While the physical condition of Parkside has not changed, the residents' assessment of its repairability has. The residents now support fixing the existing structures versus building a new one. Is this change due to a professional assessment? No, and the association urges the Housing Authority to undertake such an evaluation of the structures currently at Parkside and the funding sources necessary to repair them. In addition to such a study would include an evaluation of impact to existing rents. The other factors that the association's change in position include the necessity for residents of Parkside A building to move twice. That's been referred to already tonight. The second fact that is that approximately 10 tenants will be forced into a 2-bedroom unit apartment only to be moved out when a 1-bedroom becomes available. This is an additional move on an elderly people that is unnecessary. The requirement that units will no longer be open to only the elderly and disabled, but also include families with children, the residents currently find unacceptable. Who vets these families is an additional concern. Finally, the majority of tenants do not believe, despite repeated assurances, that Beacon's promise that existing rents will not go up. I thank you for the opportunity to address this commission.
Can you tell me, was there a formal vote of the association on this? Or?
There was an informal, non-binding vote taken.
Okay. When was that?
Tuesday evening.
Excuse me?
Tuesday evening.
Tuesday evening? Okay.
Do you have any numbers?
Hey, it was an informal vote, we didn't count.
I'm just trying to get a sense of how,
It was more than a majority. We took it, no, there was attendance, but we did not count votes individually and have them attributable to individual voters.
so,
One person didn't vote or no.
so it was basically unanimous,
There's
except for
about
the...
30 people. One person, everybody voted no, except one person.
Then how many people live there now that we're talking about?
50,
50, so 20 weren't there.
approximately. It could be about 40 at the current rate.
They couldn't get there.
I'm just trying to get the numbers straight, thank you.
There was a good turnout, more than we usually get for such a meeting.
Sounds like 65% of the population and is voting the way you indicate. If I'm doing my math.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, ma'am?
My name is Christine, and I have lived there for 9 years. And the people that are voting do not have a clue on the extent of what needs to be done. It cannot be fixed by a Band-Aid. They've been trying to do that. I've gone to Cheryl with all kinds of letters, and every time it could be fixed. If it could be fixed, it gets fixed. There are things that cannot be fixed. It needs to be renovated. There's a difference. You know, this isn't something they just made up and decided they wanted to do, to waste a lot of money. You know, they want to live there. They want to live there, but they're the first ones to complain that when we go to fix a pipe, the thing falls apart, or there's a little mold in the room, or the electric isn't working, or something's not working. They're big problems, and they need to be fixed, or we're all going to be in tents. Maybe at Foot Park, we'll just pitch tents at Foot Park. But I was not part of that vote, and I understand, no, I don't want to move. I don't want to see the rocks get blown up. I don't want to see the wildlife get destroyed. But something needs to be done with the property. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, sir.
I'm Mark Colillo, one of the new appointed commissioners for the Branford Housing Authority. So I really don't have too many points to speak because I really don't know enough information as of yet, except the fact that I was appointed to the Branford Housing Authority 4 weeks ago, and since then I have not had one single ounce of cooperation from the property manager, Merit Properties, or the Beacon Development. Outside of having one conversation with Attorney Hollister that had sent me and provided me a one-sentence, what they consider a contract to represent BHA, that's all that was provided. I've made several requests to Cheryl at Merit Properties, and she has not provided me with not even a simple financial report from last month. So I cannot obtain any information as to what's going on with the project, where it stands, or what the process is. So I don't think it's fair to the new commissioners coming on the Housing Authority that they are isolating us from what they're doing because they want to go full steam ahead, and they're bypassing us by ignoring us. So I think it's very unfair, and I don't think that the commission tonight should really afford them a vote at this time. I really think that this should be tabled until we have all the information. It's not fair to us to be newly appointed to a commission that we have really nothing to look at, and we have, you know, two entities that are not cooperating on the other side with any information regarding this project. I have spent quite a few hours at the Parkside One, knocking on doors and meeting with people, and I hear the same thing over and over again. To what this lady had just was standing up here and had said to what she had said, yes, they do need renovations, but does a 40-year-old building need to be knocked down? In my opinion, I've been a contractor for 27 years before I became a property manager, and in fact, I know that those buildings are far from needing to be knocked down. They need some upgrades, and they need some ADA compliance, and they really just need attention. That you know, and whatever happened in the past 15 or 20 years that Merit Property has been there is beyond me, because me, as having the experience of being a contractor and looking at these projects there as they stand, I don't really know what was done in the past 15 or 20 years outside of ramp setting plywood, because that was a resolution to an overhead concrete balcony that has pieces of concrete falling off the rebar. And being told that it has to be demolished because there's nothing they can do with it because there's rust on the steel itself, which I already know that that's not true. So I'm only asking tonight, the only reason why I come up here is to really give it a little more time to take a look at this so that we have an opportunity to review what's actually going on and what their real intentions are. And as for the, overriding the RTM, I don't think it's fair because you're really like violating the participatory democracy of what the RTM stands for. And so if you don't listen to the community and you only listen to a for-profit contractor really dictating what's going to be happening, I don't think it's fair. Also, let me before I forget, I've been trying to meet with the other commissioners since I've been appointed to this meeting, and all I gotten was an email from Cheryl's assistant, Bernadette, I believe her name is, telling me that they're scheduling when I meet with the other commissioners at the Yale Law School. Now, is that fair? I mean, I don't really know what's going on here. But I mean, I don't know who's running what, but it doesn't seem like the Branford Housing Authority even has the authority to really make any decisions as to what's going on because you have a property manager that, in my opinion, is really dictating to the Housing Authority. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Saris?
Carolyn Sires, 20 Linden Shores. So we're here again since 2016, one more time, one more plea bargain. They didn't get what they wanted in September of 2016, so they sanctioned the town into 830G. They didn't get the Melrose, so they said, we're going to sue the town. Now they don't want to sue the town. So we're playing seesaw, and we're playing with our town, and we're playing with our town commissioners, whether it's planning and zoning, or the RTM, or in the wetlands, or legal. It just seems not to matter. We are here 4 years later, and let's do health and safety. A lot of what I wanted to say, I'm so glad there's so many other people who have said it and spoken very well. I understand when Mr. Hollister said that the fire trucks could plow through, they don't have to look at a deed, but they have to look at the population. Do you know the reaction time for seniors and for children when a fire truck comes? Well, children will scatter left and right like squirrels, and the seniors, as you know, many of them are disabled with one leg and they can't run. And so the fire department is going to know when they go to Parkside that they have to be cautious of the populations there. There's your health and safety. And there has never been just one fire truck. When the fire department is called, it is an ambulance, a police, and a fire. There's 3 vehicles that go to that site. And I can tell you that you look out the window and you'll see all 3 and you know they're going to Parkside Village. So we're discussing one fire truck for health and safety. It's never just one fire truck. It always has to be in the trifecta, just in case, because of the population, whether it may be a police intervention or a 911 call. So you're looking at 3 emergency vehicles, let's say minimum 2, that will be going to that site that go there now. And you do the calculations and ask the architect again, based on that, how much of town property is going to need to be used for. The reality is, if they get in, they're going to have to get out. So that question has to be answered as well. You've done the right thing for 4 years. It's been difficult. And you're willing to do the courts, and I say let's let the courts decide. Because why would we give them the opportunity to actually say we don't want to go through the RTM? Well, that's the representative of the town. They represent the people of the town. They make the votes of the town. So I say if it's in court already, this was a nice discussion, but keep it where it is if you have to make a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, sir.
My name is David Clark. I'm a resident at Parkside 2, neighbor of Parkside 1. And it seems to me it's more like an election this evening than a hearing. And what I'd like to say is that I'm sure the Little League would welcome an expanded parking lot where the existing one is now. And Parkside Village 1 is in need of renovation, and it seems that it was a little immature to for safety issues especially, it was a little immature to say that a new project would be developed at that place. I think it's a location issue, and a new project there is just infeasible at that place. Certainly, the buildings are in need of some TLC, as somebody mentioned. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment? Seeing none at this time, questions or comments from staff? Mr. Hollister, let me just, I have a question from our town attorney here. I understand that we've got some new information this evening. We got another report from Mr. Versteeg. We've got some modifications of the plan. We're going to want our fire marshal to look at the modification in Mr. Versteeg's report and to comment back to us. So I anticipate we're not going to close the hearing this evening because we want his comments. But I understand, is he available at the next, at the October meeting? Danielle, was there some discussion about that?
My understanding is that Chief Heffernan can be available October 3rd if we have questions for him, or if, you know, he needs to, if you'd like him to elaborate on his position. And then obviously he hasn't reviewed what was just received today.
Right.
So we might have time for a written report, but I do believe he can be available for that.
Okay. Okay. I'm just telling you, Mr. Hauser, before you respond, because that's, given the new information that we've received from an expert, we're going to want our expert to look at that. But he will be available at the October 3rd meeting for questions from either side, which I think was a good thing. So, you know, you can ask some questions, or anyone can ask them, or we can ask some questions. So, with that, I'm going to...
All right. Well, you know, I have to express our own frustration. We had put the plans in on August 26th, and we received the fire marshal's memo yesterday morning, I believe. We turned around a response. I did provide what we gave you tonight by email to Mr. Smith early afternoon today. I think we, you know, I'm not sure I would call it new information. It's a tiny little change. It's 14 to 20 square feet in direct response to what the fire marshal asked. He wanted, if the pullover is on our property, he wanted it a little longer, he wanted it a little wider. We have done, I think, exactly what he asked. But I understand that you have the discretion to keep the hearing open, but that is certainly not our choice. I'm not going to comment on the resident frustration, except to say that, please, let's not reopen at this late date, 2 years after we started, the basic premise of this whole effort, which is that Parkside cannot be fixed with Band-Aids. It needs to be redeveloped. With all due respect, I'm going to call out Mr. Colello, with whom I spent about 25 minutes on the phone explaining tonight's application in great detail. So he had from me, and I made sure that he felt I had given him all the information before we hung up. So I'm a little chagrined for him to say that we have not been cooperative in providing that information. In response to, I believe it's Mr. Piakowski, what happens if someone puts up a concrete wall or a fence? Well, the answer is the fire marshal's not going to allow that, nor would Parkside. So, you know, we can speculate about blocking off fire access, but why would anyone allow that, including the fire marshal? So that's the simple answer to that.
Can I follow you up on that? What if someone, not on your property, because it's, you know, whatever, that's before us, but on the adjacent property, why can't someone put a fence on the property?
Because your fire marshal has said that he wants that access to remain unimpeded, and if somebody comes in and puts a fence up or a wall, the fire marshal's not going to allow it, because in his apparent opinion it would be detrimental to public safety, and Beacon would go to the court and get an injunction to prevent it from happening.
So you're saying that the fire safety is dependent on using town property, whether it's for
But
egress or egress?
all fire safety is dependent on using private property, public property. That's the point. Fire trucks can drive anywhere. They don't look at whether they're driving on town property or private property. They get to the fire.
It's not a public road, though. It's like, you're saying it's okay for the fire truck to drive all over my property. What if I have physical barriers on my property?
that's
Not
why-
anticipating a fire.
That's why Mr. Smith and Mr. Stecker have jobs, to make sure that no one puts barriers in the way of fire trucks.
That's not my understanding of our responsibilities at all.
I could see if this was an easement, if it was a roadway, absolutely, or an easement. That's because roads are easements. But why does it even have to be paved? Why could they just tear it up, reconfigure the ball fields, put that as the fence and put the, whatever? What's to stop anyone from doing that? Selling it to a private organization, they can reconfigure it, it's their property. Unless that's what my understanding of what the fire marshal considers. That's why it had to be some sort of deed restriction or something, an encumbrance that went with whoever owned the land. Because to prevent someone from putting something up there, because I don't know why it would be, unless it's a designated fire access way, and if it was a roadway, yeah, absolutely, but I don't think it is. That's the issue I'm
Well, Mr.
wrestling
Chairman,
with.
let me go back. The issue here that we started with, and it really is the issue before you, is that the condition is written on June 13th,
Right.
said we need a deed restriction. And we say we don't need a deed restriction at all. But if the commission is insistent, we will, number one, pull it onto our property. Now the RTM is taken out of it because the pullover is completely on Parkside property. And then the second issue is, how do you preserve that in perpetuity? And the answer is with a site plan condition that says, we, Parkside, will not touch that without permission from the commission, the fire marshal, and the police chief. I don't know what else we can do. We're just trying to avoid an unnecessary step. That creates problems for the application. And oh, by the way, a requirement that there be a deed restriction that we may not be able to get is, I think you well know, not going to fly under 830G. That it would be a condition that's not based on health or safety. It's based on, I don't know what it's based on, but it's not based on health or safety.
Here's how I see it. If in fact you need to use property you don't own to provide emergency access, to access the property for emergency access, which is necessary, and if you're dependent on property that you don't own, that's even a standing issue in my mind. That do you even have authority to file an application that requires part of that application to be complete for the third party to consent to use of their land for fire access? But 830G says if there's a condition, if you can address it by conditions, you got to do it, which we have done. That's what I understood the fire marshal to say. Because you've had lots of discussions with the RTM, with the town. At one point, you completed a land swap. I don't know what's going on with them. I don't, that's their thing. It's their call. I don't know what I would do if I were in the RTM, but all I know is that it's not your property. And you're saying that to get to the site, as I understand you're expert, you have to go on someone else's property, so that other person has to leave it open for you to get onto the property. They are restricted on their property as to what they can do. It has to be paved, it has to be on there, the fire truck has to get there. That's the issue that I see, unless I'm wrong, unless in fact you can do everything on your property. Maybe you can, although your expert just said you couldn't. Otherwise, you're saying that there is some impediment on the adjacent property, which is owned by the town, that has to remain open for access, for emergency access to get to your site. And maybe that's right, but why is that? That's what I don't understand. Unless that is some designated restriction already that requires that access way, because it's paved, be open to all properties. I don't know. What is to stop anyone if the town, like I just gave a scenario, gave it away, and they want to tear it up and they narrow the road.
Landscape.
And why couldn't they do that? And that's why I understand the fire marshal wanted assurance that it would be, that it would be remain so that you could get on the access. And I read the conditions as a little bit broader than simply the pullover area, and I understand that. You've moved that on your property, and if that fits a fire truck, I understand your point, okay, that should solve the issue. But that's why I was asking the other question. The whole access issue requires a requirement that the neighboring property owner allow that. And whether it's a deed restriction or some other way, maybe you're saying it's something less, I don't know. But it seems to me it has to run with the land, because whoever owns that land has to make it available for fire access to your property. And that's what I'm looking for. How is that? What authority do you have to do that? What authority do you have to say to property that you don't own, that you can put that has to be restricted so it can provide access to your site for emergency access? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, the first problem I'm having is the fire marshal is the one who insisted that there be an emergency pullover in the first place. And we agreed to do that, and now we've agreed to move the location.
Right.
We've also given you, not that it's necessary, but a public access easement across the part of Sliney Road that's on the Parkside property.
Sure.
So we're really talking about this tiny little portion right here. And that's town property. And we're now completely speculating about some way in which the town would put up a fence or a barrier to the pullover that the fire marshal had insisted upon. Really?
I would like to hear from the fire marshal, because when I read his
Well-
letter on the 18th, I'm reading that the size of the truck with the ground letters doesn't fit in the size of the pullover.
Well,
Nobody's addressed how many vehicles need to come to the site. Nobody's addressed my questions, what's the path that those fire trucks need to use to leave the site?
Okay.
Because, to me, that information, all that has to happen on the town property. If you tell me that you can go onto Sliney Road, not park there, service the building safely, how do you get the trucks out of there? You'd have to back them out onto Route 146, which is equally as dangerous. So you're providing access to the side of the building with no means to get the trucks in or out or turn them around. If the building were smaller, you could loop it through the site. If you closed Sliney Road, then there's other solutions. You're not solving the problem of what you're proposing to provide a safe solution.
All right, well, with all due respect, I think we've gotten way off track here. The issue, let me try to bring this back to the issue, which is, do we need a deed restriction for that little corner? For the fire truck to leave the Parkside property at the end of Sliney Road and make it into the emergency access pullover, which, by the way, we have now enlarged exactly as the fire marshal requested. And the answer is no, because a fire truck doesn't need that authorization. Then your question is, could the town, somebody build a barrier? And our answer is, well, if the fire marshal's requiring that there be a pullover in that location, and he has to get to that location, the fire marshal is not going, who is a town official and who has jurisdiction over town roads and private property, is not going to allow a barrier in that location. That's the answer, and we don't need to go to deed restrictions in order to enforce that. It's a site plan issue.
One thing that it just might be helpful for the record, for everybody here and in the audience, to just understand the requirements of the town charter, because it's pretty broadly written, and I know it was in the August 14th letter to Attorney Hollister, but I think it just creates a context for what's required for town property. So it's section 73.7, and it says that no town agency, town officer, or the Board of Selectmen shall acquire, sell, lease, mortgage, abandon, gift, transfer, or encumber in any manner real property of the town until such action has been approved by a majority of the members of the RTN. So that's the town charter. That's the document here that we have to look at to say, well, what's required? And we're requiring compliance with the town charter, and that's what makes the encumbrance of any manner on town property have to go to RTN. I just thought that might be helpful to
Sure.
give the
Thank you.
context of why we're
And Mr.
requiring a deed
and-
restriction or an easement or no, whatever we want to call it.
And picking up on what Attorney Berkery just referred to, it is not possible, in my view, you could talk about that little turn that I just put my finger on as preventing a barrier there as an encumbrance on town land. It's not an encumbrance. It's a condition on the use of land that is enforced through a site plan. It's a prohibition. It's not an encumbrance. And it's an unnecessary prohibition, as I said before, because the fire trucks, even if you had a barrier there, the fire truck theoretically could just knock it over if it had to get to a fire. That happens sometimes. But we're not going to let that happen in the first place.
Sure.
Can we have an assurance that Mr. Heffernan will be here next time? I'll bring Mr. Versteeg and we'll have this out.
No, that's, Ms. Berkery, is your understanding that he,
I mean, that's certainly my understanding today. I mean, he could get sick, so I cannot guarantee that he's going to be present, but I think that was, that's the goal that we talked about, so that way we could try to resolve this issue.
Correct.
For once and for all.
yeah, I think it's the best we can do, but he is available, we're asking him to come, and I think that would be better than simply exchanging letters if he's actually here.
Is it fair to ask them to provide the way out for the fire truck as well as the way in?
You can ask, we can ask him that.
To provide that for the meeting, so, because I'm going to be asking Mr. Heffernan about that.
We can ask Mr. Heffernan
So, I mean-
to address that, and they can address it as well. Fred, did you have a question?
Attorney House, I'd like to ask you a question. I agree with you in regards to a fire engine coming on a piece of property and not having to, go to town hall and find out whether there's a deed restriction, there is a deed restriction. I agree with that. That's if there's an existing building. But this isn't an existing building. This is a new building. And that's why we have these hearings and these meetings to iron out these issues. And I think you take more lightly of the fact that the building isn't up. The burden isn't on us. The burden is on you to put your building, your fire protection on your property and never have to use town property. And so, I think there's been a lot of talking going back and forth. And I'm asking myself, yeah, sure, if the existing park site caught on fire, I don't care what's in the way, a wall, a fence, that fire engine is going to knock it down. But there is no building there. That building is only on that piece of paper. And you try and manipulate lines to make it work. Manipulate your building, make it smaller, pull it in, shorten it up, do something so that it's not an issue. But that would be an expense to you to do that. It's easier to have these kind of discussions. But I think in the end, this safety burden is on you. We have a condition. I don't think it's an unreasonable condition. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect whether it's a town or a private property owner. I think what's really dangerous is the precedent this would set, that a developer comes in, wants to do something, doesn't have enough land, doesn't have enough for fire engines or whatever the condition might be, and the developer gets his way or her way, whatever. The burden isn't on us. The burden is on you. Do something to your building. Reduce it, modify it, don't build it at all. I don't care what you do, but how does this become our problem? And to say that fire engines can go anywhere, of course they could. There would be no one would deny that. But there's no building there. And so the idea of building a wall and not building a wall is irrelevant. The whole point of this is let's make this as safe as possible for the residents and the other people who might be in the area if, God forbid, there was a fire. And I think that burden is on you to prove that you can do that, not on us.
Well, Mr. Russo, I think you're actually agreeing with me because...
I said I agree with you on some of it.
Well, no, at the end, I think you're agreeing with me.
Which way?
Because in the sense that, first of all, you're talking about a precedent. If you take what condition 5C and 5D requires here to its logical extreme, every single fire lane in town that goes over private property needs an easement approved by the RTM. That's not realistic. That's never happened. But the point is, and this is where I started, we agree that we need to provide safe access to the buildings. The issue before you is whether we need a deed restriction to do that or whether a site plan condition is sufficient. And our belief and the whole point of this application is all we need is a site plan condition, and to reinforce that, we're pulling the pullover back on our own property to eliminate that part of the
Does
issue.
that put the burden on us? What you're
What's the
requesting
puts the burden on this commission. And I'm saying, why, I agree with Marcy, why should that be our responsibility? Because you don't have enough land, or you don't have, whatever the problem is, that's not our problem. Our problem is to look at a plan and say, this is the best plan you can do. This is the best plan that you can present that may work for Beacon, and that's fine. I understand, look, they're in business to make money. But why should we have to agree to something that's best for you and maybe not best for the town or best for the residents or whoever's going to live in that building? That's all I'm saying. I agree with the business, the fire engine, but we're talking about a hypothetical. This is a hypothetical we're talking about. In reality, if there was a wall there, a fence there, of course a fire engine is going to knock it down. And you know what? Just like every building should have a sidewalk in front of it, and yet people don't go to town hall and see if there isn't. We know that. That's just, it is what it is in every small town. But to use that as a reason or excuse, I don't know, I don't think, for me, it doesn't fly.
I think the issue is what is necessary to ensure the fire truck access. And our answer is we only need a site plan condition because the fire truck can drive wherever it wants.
And isn't the real answer on your property?
That's the point. It doesn't need, at some point, a fire truck doesn't care if it's your property, my property, the town's property. We don't need to shrink the building. What we need to do is find the mechanism for enforcement that is necessary. And
But you want to use someone else's property. You don't want to shrink your property, but you want to use somebody else's property. That's what you're really saying.
No. First of all, it's not somebody else's property.
The burden is on us to approve a condition that doesn't benefit the town, doesn't benefit the residents, doesn't benefit anybody except the developer. That's all. The only one that benefits by that.
A fire safety condition doesn't benefit the residents?
Which
really?
one?
We want the residents to be safe. We're trying to get to...
No, I agree with all that. Listen, I'm not saying we want residents, you want them to be safe sort of on your terms, but not our terms. We want them to be safe on our terms.
Yes, that's true.
Because once that building is built, you're going to be gone from this town and could care less about Branford. We're the ones we live with bad decisions when they're made. And this commission, is the first one that would be accused of they didn't do their job. I just want to make sure that if there is a better way for you to make it work, then that's on you, not on us.
Okay. And I think we've given you a sufficient way to make it work. The town is asking for an extra unnecessary step that could be a roadblock to the redevelopment.
I'd rather go the extra necessary step.
Well, Fred, we're going to continue the hearing, so we'll have to hear what the fire marshal says, so.
Yeah, I think it's really important to show, I've done fire circulation on site maps before as a professional, and I think it needs much more clarity to see the extent that truck has to travel in and out on the map so that there's a very clear demarcation of how much land is required to accomplish what you need to be accomplished. If I were Sean and got stuck with this, I'd be going to the town and say, move all those boulders, because I need that to help turn without getting further into Sliney Field, which is going onto the land. A truck's not going to want to go through. But those boulders are there for a reason, because there's a parking problem there now. So why would we encourage approving a new development that exasperates an existing parking situation? When we approved it to go through Melrose, there's a set in and there's a set out. You could pull over on Sliney Road. You could make it work. But you need to go in and do a 180-degree to turn out on the off-site property in order to get that truck back out of there. Or you're asking that fire truck to back all the way out. And if there's more than one truck there, you're asking, multiple vehicles to, it's the grade is steep on both sides. There's, maybe there's a solution where you can use the parking lot to the school. I don't know what it is. I'm not engineering this, but I can tell you it's not you might be able to swing in there a little bit, but it's not an easy swing out, and it's going to take a lot more land for that to be considered with a deed restriction or otherwise, or site condition, to make that work. And everybody, I think, needs to be aware of what that real demarcation is.
Okay. I think we've been over this one before.
Do you have any other would you like to respond to any other public comments at this time?
No, I think I reviewed those before.
Great. Okay. So then we will continue this matter to the October, what date is it? 3rd. October 3rd public hearing?
Is that your regular meeting or a
That's our
special?
regular meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. take a short break. Okay, I think we're going to start up again because we're on camera.
If I take my sweater off, can I pretend that they don't know me? I'm a different person.
We're going to call this meeting back to order. And going through our agenda, we have our minutes from September 5th. I believe they were circulated and had a chance to review. And does someone want to make a motion about the minutes? They mess up your name again?
I wasn't going to say anything, but
Did you get your motion? I didn't hear it.
I haven't got a motion, no.
Well, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
John makes a motion to approve the minutes of September 5th, and Joe seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Correspondence, and I believe, Harry, you just handed out some correspondence from Wayne Cook concerning, I think it's mainly relates to an application we're going to hear in the future. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So I will leave that to you to read.
Okay, so we have that, so everyone has a copy of that. I think I got one in my house too, so we
It's
have those.
dated September 5th, by the way.
Right.
I also have two notices from the town of East Haven regarding two different applications. One is a text change that is scheduled for a public hearing on October 2nd, which appears to deal with the creation of an affordable housing development district, section of the East Haven zoning regulations. So if anyone's interested, I can circulate that electronically if you'd like to read about that. Any takers? Okay. There is also a notice of a, let's see, it says the East Haven Planning and Zoning Commission has commenced the process to adopt amendments to significant portions of its zoning regulations. Copy of the draft is available at Town of East Haven's website, and it cites that. I'm sure anyone on the commission could find that. If you would like me to dig up any more information on that, let me know. That's another notice. We've got a couple of communications from folks representing cellular facilities in terms of communications through the Siting Council for modifications. One, again, has to do with 10 Sylvia Street. This appears, again, to be a swap out of equipment on the tower itself. And the second one has to do with 50 Maple Street, which is, I believe, the tower on the communication equipment on the smokestack of the former MIF building in the Branford Landing Marina area. So I've got all this materials related to that. If anyone's interested, we have it in the department. That's it for communications.
Okay. Thank you, Harry. We can maybe take up the two public hearing items that both seem fairly non-controversial. First one was John Laurel, the 92 Rogers Street PDD Master Plan Amendment to allow the guy to put his deck in. So I believe the staff report makes a recommendation that of a condition that if we approve it, the condition is that staff may review and approve all minor adjustments less than 25% of the deck area to the remaining decks in this PDD, which for the purpose of future applications, the Commission considers to not constitute an increase in the dimensional elements for compliance with the PDD and other applicable sections of zoning regulations. So, do we all agree that this is an it's okay to do this? Okay, someone want to make a motion to approve the application with the condition in the staff recommendation?
moved as presented.
Moved by Marcy.
Just technical question. I assume you're also, I should have put this in here, waive the requirement for the submittal of an actual site plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that approval includes the waiver of the site plan? Correct. Yeah. So, Marcy makes a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
You take it.
Second.
You're there first.
Second by John. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so that's okay. Then item number 2 was the Liesel Lane zoning map amendment. And again, that's to rezone from R1 to BL, that 6,000 square feet area that was frankly already used as part of the parking lot, and sort of make it official. And it doesn't render anything else non-conforming. and I didn't hear any member of the public opposing it. So if that's the case, then I believe the appropriate motion would be to make a motion to approve the application, finding that it's consistent with the plan of conservation development as well as the comprehensive plan, and with an effective date of some date you want to pick that's later than after the notice.
Yeah, October 7th is, I think,
October 7th?
Let's
Okay.
call it the 10th, just to give us a
Okay.
couple extra days, just in case.
With an effective date of October 10th. So if someone wants to make that motion.
So moved.
So moved by Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Marcy. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, so then that brings us to old business, and the first item is Audra Nuzzo, the zoning regulation amendment for the addition of a new accessory use to farm use. And I understand, Harry, that you did send us some material. It was lots of red, and it was hard to read, and you've since had an opportunity to go over it again and actually review it with the applicant's attorney and come to more of a consensus. Is that correct?
That is quite correct. So you should have document dated the 13th that was in the packet sent to you on Friday that you probably received on Saturday. And you should also have a memo in front of you dated the 19th with several attachments to it. I'll just go quickly through the material that was in the packet, just sort of, I don't want to belabor this. On the other hand, I feel like I need to walk you through it a little bit, so.
Yeah.
Essentially, at the end of the deliberations, and we're still in deliberations, I would understand, but the deliberations on the larger questions about the application, my understanding was the commission wanted to take several sections out that had specifics about time of the week, day of the week, limitations on types of events, and so forth, and put those kinds of things as items that would be identified on an application that would be considered by the commission on a special exception by special exception basis, depending on the site and the specific characteristics of it. So that required some reworking, quite a bit of reworking of the proposal to add this new section 7.18. In looking at what I had in front of me as a draft, it also made sense to me to regroup some of the information there to more closely mirror what's in other special exception sections under Section 7. So it's been regrouped into a purpose statement, general requirements of that type of use, actual pieces of information required in the application itself, which again would get back to that question of, well, what do you want in the application? You want the maximum number of attendees there. That was not going to be set by the regulation itself. It's going to be set in a application by application basis. Number of, let's see, amount of parking available, impacts on town infrastructure. So you need days of the week, time, use of amplified sound or music, hours for that, traffic and parking operations, emergency service access, and several other provisions. So those are all added into a list of things that would need to be included in an application for a special exception permit, as well as all the other information required for a full site plan that addresses the normal requirements in the regulations. In addition, there were several additional standards for individual items like parking, location, noise, food service, alcohol service, so forth, landscaping. I've grouped all those together into one heading under additional standards, so it really just deleted the headings there. So again, a lot of red ink, a lot of changes, but substantively there's not, I don't think there was that much change. I did add a section at the end under additional design considerations, which would allow you to specifically impose conditions, which you probably already have the authority to do, but I laid them out specifically regarding number of attendees, days of the week, hours of the day that the use would be in operation, use of amplified music sound, which hours and days for that, number of events allowed on the property, if it's going to be, for some reason, less than the 20. So that's in a nutshell what's here. There was some items in here in reevaluating the application and talking to the applicant's attorney. Some questions came up about interpretation and what specifically was the intent and what the effect would be of some of the wording. So I've also proposed in the document dated the 19th, an attachment to that, another document with more red ink. So there's two types of documents here attached to the 19th memo. In the front of it should be three documents. One is a copy of the proposed amendments to section 3.3B, a copy of the proposed amendments to section 4.8, and a copy of the amendments proposed to create section 7.18. So on all 3 pages or documents, there should be some strikeouts and underlines showing proposed changes. Starting with section 3.3B, the accessory uses, that refers to a section of the residential district regulations, and in going back and forth and trying to clean this up, I just noted that we hadn't quite finished doing that, so there are no changes that need to be done because this use is not any longer proposed for the residential district, so there should be no changes at all to section 3.3.
Okay.
So moving on to section 4.8, the top part should have been removed and was not because that is proposing a change to non-agricultural farm events, suggesting they would be a standalone, non-accessory use. So the blue type at the bottom of that sheet would insert non-agricultural farm events as an accessory use only. So that's all that's necessary because that's all that's being proposed. And my understanding is the applicant's attorney agrees with that on both those changes. Bringing us to section 7.18. So a lot of the red ink here has to do with, I was trying to do a little shorthand here, and rather than typing out non-agricultural farm events or cutting and pasting a couple dozen times, I put in a shorthand of farm events. That was thought to be confusing, so I have no problem with calling it non-agricultural farm events. So in the document, it's always referred to now as non-agricultural farm events, to distinguish them from farm events that are not covered by this proposed regulation. Going down to the middle of the page, we added in a little bit of wording to just pick up the actual wording in the zoning regulations about the definition of lot area. There's lot area, then there's minimum lot area, which is the lot area minus steep slopes, wetlands, and so forth. During the deliberations, I think the commission consensus was we're just talking about the sheer acreage of the properties in question, period.
Correct.
So we put in language to make sure that's crystal clear. I had proposed deleting the but not limited to on 7.18B3 to make this a little more specific. But following really the logic I think the commission expressed during deliberations, I proposed putting that back in so that would allow the applicant to propose similar events, but as I'll get to in a second, in the actual application document itself, they would have to list the specific types of events. That's where the box would be created and there'd be a definitive list of events they're proposing. That could be altered with a subsequent modification application, but that would be where you create the definitive list.
For the special exception process?
Yeah, exactly. So that lets them, provides a little more flexibility there. Then going down to the next page, there's a couple of cleanups with terminology down on number 9. It says net lot area. We don't refer to that in our regs.
Yeah, I can go back.
One
Okay.
editorial question.
Sure.
On item 5, hours of operation for any non-agricultural farm events will occur only on a pre-scheduled basis. Pre-scheduled kind of sounds like a shrimp scampi. It's either an approved schedule or...
Okay. This is the applicant's word, so if you want to adjust to make it clearer.
Yeah, it's just a I don't know what pre-scheduled
So-
means, because when you schedule something, you plan something for the future. So
Yep.
to pre-schedule it's either an approved schedule or the application
It's almost
schedule.
redundant to me because you're going to set that through this the special exception process itself anyway.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't think that wording is really required.
Can we go over item 7, because I find that confusing about relative to the idea of hours of operation?
Sure, absolutely. But before we go there, we'll go there next. I don't know what the commission, I mean, it's really not required language, and I understand it creates an ambiguity. I mean, you could either just say on an approved
Say
basis.
scheduled. Say scheduled, because isn't the point of the hours of operation is we're having
That's fine.
an event, and it's going to run from X to X, and they're
Exactly,
scheduling
and that's
it.
spelled out later on, that's
But
a requirement of
really
the
all that's
application
saying in
process.
number 5, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
Just take out
So
pre.
That'll work? Would that work?
Do
Okay.
So we're taking out pre on number 5. Okay.
And going on to number 7, the reason this is all in there now is because, and at this point, the applicant is okay with this, is my understanding, that there was no real definition of what is an event and what's its potential duration. So I propose this, which allows for essentially one event on a weekend covering Friday evening through Sunday evening, if the applicant so chose. They could have 3 events on those 3 different time periods if they want, Friday evening event, Saturday event, and a Sunday event. But just provides the flexibility to do a extensive event on a weekend if they want to. That would not be interrupted by another event. So well, you have an event starting Friday and it extends to Saturday, then you have an event Saturday evening.
Couldn't you just
can't pick
say-
that same event up Sunday again.
So you're saying only one event at a time? I mean, couldn't you just say,
Yeah.
shall only hold one event at a time, as opposed to, because this is confusing to me. This reads that,
Well, how
But
long
the-
would it be then? That was the open question,
where
is
the
whether it could
scheduled
go,
basis
it could go
comes
days
in.
and days and days. I mean,
well, on any given day. I mean, I
well,
think.
that's why, I mean, we could do this a lot of different ways, and it could be adjusted in the future
To
too,
not
if it becomes a
extend over
problem.
multiple days and shall continue to open, not on 2 separate periods, a single, that may be held between Friday evening and limited to a total of 3, like,
So you're
this
not
reads to me like
chopping it.
we're only allowing events on the weekends, and I thought it was,
No, that's not true at all. I mean, it
But this is
provides
all
for,
about-
it only allows multiple day event on weekends. That's the
So
only
this
thing.
is
So
in
you-
terms of counting your 20.
Right. So
So
it actually
to-
gives them a break, so they can have
Right.
one event.
And one event.
Extends over 3 days on the
Over
weekend.
3 days.
Yeah,
Right.
so they could
exactly.
call a rehearsal dinner and the wedding one event.
They could call it the wedding.
They could call it the wedding.
Right, and it can
If you
extend
approve it
multiple
through the special
days.
exception
It only
process.
counts
Okay.
as one.
Right.
So this is pro, this gives them
I'm
more
just finding it
flexibility.
confusing the
Yeah.
way
That was
the
the
language is
intention, yeah.
written. But if it's, I'm not
Yeah.
aware.
I mean, it's certainly, I spent quite a bit of time on this and could probably spend more and make it clearer, but I only have so much. But I think my intention was to give them some flexibility on weekends, and otherwise it would be one event
Per
at
day,
a time, or
right.
one event per day.
Right.
And they
So this
decide what
is
they want to
allowing
do.
one
Any
event
day.
at a time that it can extend over multiple days.
Only on Friday to Saturday.
On the weekends.
On the weekends, right. Otherwise, they can have one event a day, they're going to have one on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever they want to decide within the 20.
Okay.
Is that clear enough? I mean, I know it's,
I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure I
Okay.
interpret it by what I'm reading. Maybe it's just a reading comprehension issue.
it could be a writing issue. So moving down here, stop me if you want to settle on one particular thing. and-
9.
9, okay.
Shall occur no less than 1,000 feet? Shouldn't that be
This
100?
this was a proposal from the applicant. So that's their,
But isn't 1,000 feet excessive on any regulation?
it depends,
Oh,
I've seen
that's so
separation
occur no
distance
less,
for-
should be within 1,000 feet. I see what I'm reading, okay. That the exclusive of parking, the event shall occur no less than 1,000 feet from any residential zone. The proposed use will exist on parcels of sufficient size to satisfy the parking requirements. I get the last part, but the language for 1,000 feet from any residential zone seems,
quite a bit.
seems pretty, yeah, I was like, I looked, I said, well, maybe they meant 100, that they're just increasing the setback to 100 feet to a residential zone, not 1,000 feet to a residential zone. And then I thought I saw later something about 100 feet, which is why I thought it was a typo.
Yeah, I mean, this was, I understand that that's wording from the original,
Well,
or some
maybe-
permutation of the proposal, so they feel like they can live with that.
But I still think
And
it's
provide
excessive
some-
and it should be 100 feet.
I,
A 1,000-foot setback? Where have we ever in town had a 1,000-foot setback? I mean, isn't that what that's saying?
it's it's a setback from a residential zone. The main issue I'm concerned with any of these is noise.
Right.
And frankly,
But we don't have a 1,000-foot setback from the brewery in the PDD. I mean, it's,
Frankly, I didn't evaluate it because it was language suggested by them, and I
right.
was looking at it from the other point, is it enough? I think it's more than enough.
Here's
yeah.
my
Yeah.
take. It works for them. It protects, more than if it was less than the neighbors. It provides more protection. It makes them work. If someone else wants to make it less, let them come in and propose an amendment.
propose it as a
This
modification.
is what they proposed. Hey, it's protective of the residential neighbors, so.
Well, so just as a distinction then, the event shall occur no less than 1,000 feet, but you can have accessory structures within 100 to 150 feet, like the bathroom facilities and stuff like that.
That's what I'm saying.
And parking. But the event itself, the thing that generates noise and nuisance would be 1,000 feet away.
That's the way I interpret it.
I just think,
a lot for 7 acres.
yeah, I just think it was an oversight, and it should be, make it 200 feet, then, I just think that's.
It's up to you.
That's
I mean, it's your regulations.
not
so,
a wise number on a regulation like this, whether it's, I mean, do you agree with me?
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
a lot, but I didn't, they picked the number.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's just a typo, to be honest, because it doesn't make sense.
They came up with it.
Yeah, right, I agree.
But can't we adjust it to be more functioning?
We're arguing a bunch of stuff for nothing.
Yeah.
We're okay with it.
They're okay with it, lets them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next section provides for the other piece of, once you've got special exception approval, further down here is a requirement for a general operations plan, which was suggested, which will identify everything about the non-agricultural farm events on the properties proposed. And then annually, there would be this, and this is right out of the North Branford regulation that was talked about during the public hearing and during deliberations. There would be a list of events scheduled for that year and the dates, number of persons expected, type of nature of the event. And there's a provision here to amend the list with 45 days' notice. This all goes to the zoning enforcement officer. This is not something that they'd come back to the commission to get approved or blessed, unless she thinks it's exceeding or not compliance with the general operations plan. Then they would work that out with the applicant and even possibly come back and modify the special exception approval if they needed to. This also provides for identification of an event coordinator to serve as a point of contact for the town, particularly emergency service personnel, and be responsible for the implementation of both portions, the general operating plan and the annual event plan.
Again, as just an editorial kind of thing, if the event coordinator two, if we just move the shall be on site where that two is, the sentence would read with a lot more coherence.
Okay, I'm not sure I know exactly where you are.
On number 11?
Oh, number 11, okay.
I'm sorry, I thought we were up to 11. We
Yeah,
were
I was-
talking about site
I didn't got there
coordinator.
yet,
I was
okay.
on 10. Because I had a question
I'm
about
hard of
10.
words, I can't.
So basically, they're saying that no event can be scheduled earlier than 45 days' notice.
Right. And they're okay with that?
I just don't know what the
That's
lead
how-
time is for events.
Well, that's up to how they want to run the property, but this is a model that was ended up in the public hearing record from North Branford, and it seems to implement what I heard the commission wanted to do, and I didn't frankly start parsing the thing out as long as they were in agreement with it. I mean, they could propose something different. It was not raised to me as an issue.
I'm just trying to understand how I get with weddings, it's an annual event operating and have that kind of lead
Yep.
time. I just don't know how much lead time you really have with other
Yeah, I don't
of
operate one of
events
these facilities
and
either, I just, yeah.
And you're saying that's in the North Branford rec?
Yep. I mean, I moved the date, April 1st rather than May 1st, and made it a little earlier, which gives everybody a little more flexibility, I think. So on to 11? Okay. So, Joe, I'm not sure where you were.
Shall the event operator?
Your engaged non-agricultural farm event, the event coordinator.
Oh, there's a word,
shall
missing
be
word
on
there.
site
Yeah.
to direct the operations of all vendors, patrons, It just move the shall be to 2. I think it was just a victim of red line strikeout.
Yep, thank you. Number 12 was another provision from the North Branford regulations that seemed to make sense to include. This just deals with tents and membrane structures, making sure they're removed during the off-season and comply with all the requirements.
Yeah, for what it's worth, tents and membrane structures are regulated as temporary structures under the building code, and there is a sunset on the duration these things are allowed to be up when you get your initial permit. So that's...
And they're permitted by who? And how do you permit the tent through?
I'm sorry?
You said that the tents get permitted for a...
Under the building
time,
code.
Under the building code, but who enforces that? Is that done through the CEO?
Building inspector.
Or building inspector.
Building inspector.
Building official, yeah. Well, I don't know what that period is when they would need to be removed, but how long it is, but if one's up at the end of the seasons, just, provides for it to go away.
The intent is not to have derelict temporary structures.
Yeah. And then moving on, these are all the application requirements would be in addition to the normal requirements for a special exception application. Propose removing, because I understand that East Shore Health does not regulate these two things, and typically we don't require that kind of thing, particularly if there's no real provision for these types of things to be found in conformance with the public health code. That's something they don't regulate, apparently. And this was language that was in the application, so. But that was found out late in the game, so proposing removing it since it's not necessary, and there's no way to, there's no evidence they could submit because there's no revision for compliance. Going down to number 5, this is where I took out the, what are limited to, put that language back in. Here, they would have to include a definitive list of types of events as part of their application for a special exception. I also put in any temporary lighting proposed. This is just, in talking about the application in the office, is just people suggest that that's a typical component of these type of events, and that it really ought to be looked at so it doesn't become a problem for budding property owners and so forth. Make sure it complies with the regulations. So going down to additional standards, I just tweaked some language down on the last page of the 7.18. There had been a provision in here for such facilities. I'm really proposing approval for the use, not the facility. So change that to the non-agricultural farm event. Shall not provide food unless do so. Same thing with the alcohol. I had some language in here that went beyond really, I think, the four corners of this proposed regulation. So rather than talk about prohibition on alcoholic service outside of the parameters of what's a non-agricultural farm event, I turned that around to say you're only issuing a special exception approval for non-agricultural farm events, that only authorizes the provision of sale of alcohol during, as part of the actual non-agricultural farm event. So it doesn't go beyond that. This is not zoning authorization to serve or sell alcohol outside the parameters of. There might be other regulations or processes that come into play to control that. but nothing to do with this regulation or this application, or any application approved under it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. That's pretty much it. So with those changes, now I did have some cleaned up versions, so.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Under landscaping,
Yep.
complete visual screening shall be provided during all times of operation.
That was language from the
Is
applicant.
that language in our regulations?
No. That was suggested by the applicant, we just left it in. So I've got 3 documents, which are, before we made, these made changes to them, were to be the final versions that you could adopt, and I can make the changes to 7.18 that were discussed. And this could be what you go with, should you choose to approve it.
Okay. And you did kind of review these with the applicant's attorney?
I did.
Is that okay with?
Yes.
Okay.
They have informed me they're in agreement with them.
Okay, any discussion?
Just on the points I mentioned earlier. Kind of an as-you-go kind of girl.
Yeah. Well, are we then, there was one change, the change, I think that,
So I've got the top of, let's see, 7.18B.
B11?
5.
Or 5.
And we're taking out the PR pre. So
Taking
just
out the
be
pre.
current on a scheduled basis, period.
Right.
You should add a period at the end. And then down on 7.18B11, removing the words after the second occurrence of non-agricultural farm event, the word shall be on site at the parcels to after the words event coordinator on the first line.
Right.
To make it read correctly.
Okay. I'd like to get this done.
I think you're almost
Well, they
there.
can come back and modify
Absolutely.
this as part of the
Yeah,
special.
but I think they can live with this, and so they're good with it, so let's, so I want to make a motion to approve this text amendment with the 2 changes that Harry just explained, I think to 718B5 and to B11.
Yeah, there's,
With the findings that it's consistent with the plan of conservation and development, and it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan of zoning with an effective date of October 10th.
10th will work. And you're also deleting or are you deleting the proposed changes to section 3.3B?
Correct.
Okay.
We're also deleting that, right?
So I'm taking it, okay, so just to be clear, we've got the 3 documents all in black with the changes that were discussed and we talked about. Okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah, is there a motion by Joe? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Great. Congratulations. Okay. Next on our agenda, which I've lost, is...
Henschel,
Okay.
School Street.
Is Henschel, which is what, a public hearing, item number 2 is we have a public hearing scheduled for the 17th. Item number 3 then, we have Bausch and Strobel Machine Company, and that's at 10 Thompson Road. Is the applicant here on that? Again, Strobel Engineering. Also with me is Oliver Schmidt from Bausch and Strobel. This plan had been approved in 2015. In fact, there's the plan that was approved in 2015. Looks almost identical. What has happened is that, I'm sorry.
Building smaller.
The building footprint changed slightly, It got a little narrower this way, a little bit longer. The shed area, carport that was in the back is now on the side. I guess it's the back from 139. But as you can see, the parking area in the front has not changed at all. The loading dock area is still in the same location. Only this time one is a loading dock and the other one's a drive-in door, so there's a retaining wall in between. Parking area in the back is very similar. Under this new plan, the difference is there's a different architect involved, and so here's the architectural elevations for the building. Unfortunately, I couldn't color copy it for you, but it's a very beautiful building. So one of the things that has come up, Harry and I have had much conversation about, is parking requirements. This type of facility they don't need as much parking as the regulations say, if you break it down into office space and warehouse, manufacturing. And we've looked at some information from around the country, and it seems to be that if you take this type of manufacturing overall square footage and use a 1 per 1,000 square feet parking, it's something more reasonable. They feel like they only need 50 employees here. And even with the 1 per 1,000, we'll have 77 spaces, so it'll give them more than they need, but quite a bit less, about 30 less than the current regulations state. So we're looking to have that kind of amended as part of the approval from the last time. But overall, everything's pretty much the same. We're going to have the same landscaping plan that had been approved. This was a landscaping plan that you folks had approved before. This is so this building will be built in phase 1 and phase 2. This was the phase 1 plan, and this is like a wildflower kind of area, so nothing significant would be disturbed when phase 2 would get built, but basically the same thing with some very minor adjustments to adjust with the different shape of the building.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about how they're going to run the plant? Because my understanding is that some of the office personnel, they're not necessarily a traditional manufacturing plant. We've got office segregated out here and manufacturing floor people there, that there's some kind of integration. I don't know what, there we go.
Okay. So, yeah, and maybe I could get Oliver to talk about that, but so in the old plan, the office was more or less this way, and now the new office is this way, but they do 3D virtual reality labs that needs quite a bit of space so that you're not walking into things, and you have headsets on, and they have a cafeteria area that's larger than probably most office buildings, and so and the manufacturing has kind of moved to more automated type of things than, you don't need quite as many people hands-on on every machine as you used to. So because of all these reasons, they have bigger space requirements for less people, basically. And that was part of the whole parking debate.
Okay. I hate to do this, but I got another memo that's revised, just because it has everything in it. We just finished this afternoon, so we have to work this out.
And where's the parking going to get?
So the plan that's on here actually has the bigger parking count on it, and this was just this week, Harry and I kind of worked out the lesser parking. So if you take out all the reserve spaces that we had here, this actually fits what we need right now. So we could actually take some of this pavement out as reserve now You know what I'm saying?
What was the calculation? What are you taking out, or what do you need, and what's going to be
So
there?
before, with this, the Phase 1 and 2 build-out, we needed 107 spaces, and now we only need 77 spaces.
So
So
how many do you need? Do you feel you need? You said you have 5 employees?
No,
Or
50 is what they felt they need. But with visitors, 77 is probably reasonable.
That's reasonable, yeah.
Well, it's a level site, so you have room to expand it in the future.
They could expand in the future if they need it. They don't feel like they're going to need more than that, but there is space available. Again, we've shown on here areas where they could add in additional parking.
And then what you show now with the 77 is essentially the 58 surface ratio percent? Or is that with?
Yeah, because the 60% was with all the extra spaces that we're not going to need to build.
Well, that's required, but you say existing, meaning what's proposed, right?
Well, they're
Right.
proposing some deferred spaces, too.
The spaces that we showed as reserve area,
Or
that
in
would,
that
that would have
coverage?
taken us to the 60
Right.
if we had to build those, so.
So we're bettering that.
Yes.
Sounds like significantly.
So basically, you're looking
Oh,
at...
45.
You're going to have parking in the front?
Yes, there's parking in the front
That's
here.
where your office-
The main
where your
entrance,
office workers?
the main entrance is a corner right here.
What's that entrance?
There's, the main entrance to the office area is in this corner here.
All right.
And then, obviously, there's limited space in the front, but there's 40 spaces there.
Okay.
And then these would be for, people working in
So now,
the processing.
I'm thinking you got office workers in the front, and then you got your manufacturing people in the back, right? So you need some spaces for them.
Right, and we do have that here.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little more mixed up than your average manufacturing facility. I think some of the folks in the office go down, it's a lot of robotics, is my understanding, so.
Yeah.
It's people going back and forth, and it's more than actual people making things. It's people running machines and looking upstairs in the office, going back and forth to make sure it's all working.
What's the
So-
difference between the proposed building Phase 1 and Phase 2?
The footprint is a little smaller, again.
But I mean, is there something in the use, like how does that get?
The use, no.
What's being added in
There's
Phase 2?
there's more office space, but again, it's because of enlarged spaces for the same number of employees, basically.
So the
But they do have more.
employee count doesn't necessarily change?
No,
with
it's the
phase-
same model that they have here, it's just a slightly different building. Same business model.
Well, I'm
that
just
they-
looking at on this, you've got this versus this. Am I looking at an old?
No, this is Phase 1, Phase 2.
Right, so this isn't going in. This-
Not immediately, right.
But this is more the same of this. There's a few more, they're adding offices or they're,
So in the floor plan, this is that Phase 2 area, and the majority of this is warehouse and manufacturing stuff, but this piece here would be expanded space for
the offices.
for the offices, right?
And they are in this plant consolidating operations they have in other facilities around locally and adding new
Yeah, their
operations.
North
Right,
Branford
Branford
facilities
will come down
coming in,
here.
correct?
Welcome.
So in terms of the mechanics on the zoning, there is a provision of the zoning regulations, which is in section 6.5D. It's a little table note, actually, right before the table that has all the parking standards, and it provides for the commission to determine the required parking for a use not covered in the actual table itself. So previously, you would distinguish this as a different use than traditional manufacturing. Like we had called it something like computer-aided manufacturing or robotic-aided manufacturing. So just in revisiting what should be the parking standard, I pulled out again this publication and closed a few pages at the end of the staff report. So if you go back to the end here, there's several cited, and I won't go through this in any detail at all, but there's requirements as low as one space per 2,000 square feet of gross leasable floor area. So there's a wide variety here. Some communities do it by employees. I think the one space per 1,000, given this type of facility, in my opinion, fits well and will provide enough parking. So I think that number is something I would be comfortable if the commission adopted that. And I think you've got a provision in the regulations that allow you to do that. So that's one. I had not gone through all that when I submitted the staff report into you in the packet. And also proposing several potential changes to the site plan, and most of these are very minor things. The architectural plans weren't signed, stamped, sealed, signed by the professional architect who prepared them. I think the sugar maple along the road, I've been told by our new assistant, I guess, at this point, the tree warden, that sugar maple is susceptible to, you can help with salt. They're not salt tolerant. And the habitat conditions are starting to change with global warming, and they're not necessarily going to be a great tree to plant along the streetscape. So just suggesting that change. Also with the reduced parking requirement, the number of spaces actually on the plan could be shrunk down to the 77 from the number that's on there now. The plan right now shows the preservation of, I think it's 4 very large, I think 2-foot diameter sugar maples along the western property boundary. However, adjacent to that is proposed a stormwater detention area. So shrinking the parking up a little bit will allow some more to pull that stormwater detention area further away from those trees to try and save them.
This one.
Also proposed in there that should further examination by, as required by the regulations, by a Connecticut licensed arborist, determine that 1, 2, several of those trees can't be preserved, that they could swap out some alternative landscaping along that property line as required by the regs. Also proposed prohibition on the storage of outside materials. So it's not identified, so I'm assuming they do not want to do that.
Yeah, there's none of that planned. That's part of what that shed carport area is for. Yeah.
Okay. Also, they're getting pretty close, since this was approved previously in 2015, to the 5-year time limit. So I believe one of the emails requested an extension of that.
Yes.
So I'm proposing that the commission actually extend the time frame, additional 5 years, to completion would not need to happen to September 3rd, 2025. And that all requirements of the previous approval remain in full force or effect as they may still apply. So that's essentially it.
So did we not vote on the reduction of parking spaces?
You should have 2 findings, so I forgot, I skipped over those. So finding 1 on page, should be page 5. Provides for the commission to find that per that section 6.5D2 table note 1, that the parking standard of 1 space per every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for this, I call it computer-aided robotics assisted manufacturing, is warranted based on the documentation presented by the engineer, staff, and previous testimony regarding the nature of operations in the facility. Also, I skipped over, there is a requirement for a landscape island every 15 spaces, whether you're in the middle of the parking lot or whether you're at the sides, the edges of the parking lot. In this case, you're going to have vegetation along the side of the parking lot, and I think the maximum length is, 17 spaces or something? So it's not a very big parking lot. I think this is phase 2.
No, and this is how it was approved, because we were planting
Right.
all along.
Yeah.
Instead of just at the ends, we were planting all along the whole row. So.
Right. So I'm proposing waiving that requirement for excellence in landscape design, so they don't have to put an island in, break up a road that's only 17.
Not a lot of maneuvering in there for snowplow.
No.
So.
More than what would be required if you put them in the lot.
Yeah.
You'd have 3 islands, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, almost 9 trees.
There's a lot of vegetation proposed. It's a very extensive landscaping plan, yeah.
Any questions or comments by anyone?
Well, we previously approved this, so we're just approving modification for
Right.
the building change and the number of the parking.
And the parking.
Right.
Yep. And those little odds and ends I cited, that's staff comments, as numbers 5, 7, 8, and 12 regarding the stamp and seal and the,
This very large oak tree is staying, by the way. It was on the original plan to be removed because DOT had required it to be removed, and, well, there was a lot of back and forth, and actually, First Selectman called me, and so there was a number of people concerned about that tree, and the DOT really backed off because our driveway is so far back off of the road that they really, that's a town sight line, it's not our sight line, so it's staying now.
Okay. If we like it, then someone want to make a motion to approve the application with the findings and conditions that are, and modifications there on pages, pages 5 of 4.
Yeah,
5 and 6.
it's not quite, yeah, 5 and 6. Thank you.
5 and 6 of the staff report.
Move as presented.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brings us to items 4 and 5, we're back to Liesel Lane. We approved the map change, and now we have a subdivision determination and a site plan modification.
Good evening, Carl Porto back for the application, one with Jim. We've discussed a fair amount of what's going on, and as the hour is getting late, I won't go back over it, but we're back here for the site plan modification application as well as the subdivision modification. The subdivision modification is very similar to the one that was previously approved. It really deals with the same lot line adjustment, the same 6,900 square feet, or 6,900 square feet. And I'll turn over to Jim to talk about the few site plan modifications we're going to make, which are predominantly cosmetic, and as I mentioned, no change to the footprint of the building, drainage, and those type of things.
Yeah, so as Carl said, this site has been this way for a number of years. There's this kind of big, funny facade thing that's detached from the front of the structure. This two-story. That's going to be removed. There were some pavement areas that they extended up to the property line here, and over these got extended, and there was a gravel display area for cars, and they filled in some islands that were supposed to be landscaped. So as part of all this, those excess spaces, pavement areas will be removed. The curb line's being moved so that it's 5 feet away from the property line. We're creating a curbed area around the entire building now, basically, except for where the entrances are, to provide building landscaping where basically it's paved up to the building almost the whole way around, except for the front. We're taking the pavement back out of the islands, putting an island back in here that somehow disappeared, and we're adding some street trees. And now I'm hearing sugar maples are not in fashion anymore, so, whatever the tree warden liked, within reason. So basically, that's how we're getting that reduction from 90 down below 80%, is because the little bits that they kind of expanded the pavement area over the years, we're taking back and then providing an area for building landscaping that doesn't exist now, so. Otherwise, all the other renovations are interior. We do have, I shouldn't say that, they are dressing up the building.
I was going to say, the exterior is going to look a lot like their building than the
Right.
existing surgical center and main office building, so have a different skin. It won't have that steel effect.
Right, so here's the existing building, there's that funny facade thing that's there. And you folks should have these plans, but, so the new building facade will look, like Carl said, like there are buildings across the street.
This isn't in the town center area, is it?
No.
So the front is that top left one? That's the side to the street?
This is actually the side that faces
And then that's the facade
Route
that
1.
leads a lane up there.
And this is the side that faces Liza Lane. This is the main entrance, it's on this side of the building.
So they adding door openings and things like that?
There's actually one there that they're just kind of reconfiguring it.
So
already.
moving openings to the
I think
building to make
it was
work.
wide, one of those doors that you can unhinge and put a car through. So they're just putting a normal door in. These are window areas where there's overhead doors now, taking them out.
Putting windows in. Is that a water table on the, looks like there's a water table running on the lower part of the plan.
So there's
That,
like brick
yeah, is that-
along the bottom.
Is brick?
Brick, there will be brick facade, and then, like, I believe it's the ephes above, like, again, to mimic what's going on across the street. In the back, there's 2 steps out, that's why it looks like it's kind of detached. Grade does drop just a little bit.
Actually, the subdivision one is number 4. I think we probably got to hear that one first before we can approve this one.
So, if I can, I could speak to that a little bit. This is actually the map that's in the land records. There was 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. Here's Liza Lane, oriented the other way now. And the Stone Ridge parcel was remaining land of Consolidated Enterprises. So what we were doing is actually taking a piece off. This actually wasn't even called a lot at the time. There was another map in the zoning file, which is not actually in the land records, that does show the entire piece, so I don't know if it got added to somewhere in between to make this piece bigger. But they still call it remaining land. It's not a lot number, so, you know, we're asking for a subdivision modification, but I'm not even sure if that's really applicable, or, so I guess that's up to you folks.
Is there an easement running through that?
There is a drainage easement that runs right through here.
There's a pipe?
There is a pipe. It's the catch basin. There's a catch basin that's over the pipe and on our pavement area, and it's fairly deep. You look down, it's probably 15 feet
So what
deep.
is that for? Is that
It's
a
town.
property?
Sanitary sewer, I think.
Is that for
No,
sale?
there's both, I think. It's sanitary and drainage in favor of the town.
And it's starting from where? If you go back to, can you go back to that previous map? I'm just trying to see if I can see where it starts and go back a page. You can see it better on the other page, that's why I was, the plan before, yeah. So what's that parcel on the left? Down, that it's starting at?
Go along North Main.
Yeah.
What
is that property?
Is that the bank?
Yeah.
The bank.
This is the bank here, right next door.
So is that the Staples parking lot?
This may
Staples?
be,
Or that's the other
is
Kia
there something in
dealership?
between?
There's a car dealership there, maybe?
something in between. I think this corner there's a condo back here.
In the back,
Yeah.
right, but on
But
Main
you can see,
Street.
this kind of goes that way. I'm not really sure
Oh,
why
so-
it originated.
So it might be sewers for that condo association, and that's
It
going
could
out
be.
to where? Is it turning on the other side of Clancy
Yeah,
Street or
it comes
whatever
down
that?
here.
Which is, which road, Clancy? Is that Clancy?
Yeah, it doesn't show it on there.
So it's probably from the housing out to Clancy for sewer.
Yeah, could be.
Primarily.
It's hard to know from, we don't have enough information to really, without getting the sewer maps
I
out
just
to
wanted
know.
to
Yeah.
understand what it was.
No, yeah, I just don't want to say because I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not changing anything, so we didn't chase it all the way to each end.
Yeah.
Rich, you did the staff report on both of these?
Yes. This is the second and third phase of it. So this is just the subdivision modification, which is, 8.9. So we're just trying to make sure that the lot line revision doesn't affect any street layout, affect any area reserved for public use or create any additional lots. The easement runs through it. The applicant has submitted a map, meets and bounds for the lot line revision, signed and sealed by a licensed surveyor, and that will be recorded on the land records. I think the recommendation is that the proposed lot line revision does not constitute a subdivision or a re-subdivision.
Okay, and that's, you guys agree with that? That this is not a subdivision or re-subdivision?
Right.
So we should probably, should we make a finding to that effect? Is that the-
Or vote, whichever.
Okay, should we want to make a motion to approve the, is it a subdivision
Modification,
modification?
whether it's, may technically not even be necessary because the back property was not technically a lot, but
Right. Well, is there a motion to find that we don't need to approve because it's not a subdivision or a re-subdivision? It's simply a lot line adjustment.
Right.
I don't know. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So, okay.
I'll make that motion.
John made that motion. Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that, now we can go to the site plan because it's okay to merge that.
Right.
To take that on and we can approve that. So Rich, you did that staff report too? I think you
Yeah, so this is an existing site plan. We're trying to make the practicable improvements to it as part of the modification, going from car dealership to a medical office building. Obviously, it's the use is allowed in the BL zone. We made some suggestions for landscaping, which are included for the front yard, side and rear landscaping requirements, planting bed requirements, and residential district green belt buffers. The parking, as noted, that's part of the driving reason, the reason driving the purchase of the property was to keep the parking spaces of 40.
Mentioned that the parking requirements are only 30 spaces for the square footage of this building, but because the nature of back-to-back appointments in multiple areas of the building, there's an overlap when someone's arriving before the other person's leaving, so they felt they needed the extra spaces. That's why that was the whole driving factor of keeping that in other area.
Yeah, outdoor lighting, again, we're just going to check it out to see if it's conforms to the current regulations. There don't appear to be any drainage or stormwater control problems. So then we have put together some recommendations, so stating that prior to issuance of a certificate of zoning compliance for the issuance of, issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the following shall be addressed. Non-compliant lighting switched over, more lighting that is compliant, so we just spelled that out to make sure that it meets the certification requirements. And again, another lighting issue where it's just reiterates that the existing lighting complies with outdoor lighting and lighting appendix. Landscaping must be maintained as an ongoing requirement of the approval. To ensure survival of all required landscaping shown, no additional signage or new replacement lighting shall be installed without Planning and Zoning Commission approval or that of the staff, whichever may be appropriate. The compliance of the proposed signage or lighting with the regulations. Species of street trees shall be approved by the town planner. The trees shall be 2.5 to 3 inches in caliber. Added street trees conform, the added street trees should conform to the zoning regulations. The planting bed vegetation, looked at that again too. Species, spacing, and size shall be reviewed and approved by the town planner or designate. And town engineer recommends that the existing system be examined for any needed maintenance and repairs, and any any action be noted on the site plan.
What existing system?
Yeah.
Storm system? I'm not sure I followed what you said. What existing system?
Stormwater drainage.
Stormwater, yes.
That's a typical thing to do. And needs to go to the WPCA just to ensure any additional flow into the system when it's approved.
Any comments? Someone want to make a motion to approve the application with the conditions that Rich just read that are referenced on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report?
So moved.
So moved by Joe. Second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
That's all we got.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening. Thank you.
Waited a long time.
Okay, Chris, item number 7, we have a public hearing for the 17th as well as the 18th. Number 8 as well.
Yep. Item 6 is the third.
Yeah, item number 6.
On new business,
Right.
we're suggesting a public hearing date of the 17th for a 3 Elms Road application.
Okay, that's item number 1, the public hearing on the 17th. Item number 2, same thing?
Yes.
17th, public hearing on item number 2, new business. Brings us to other business, informal review of conceptual plan, expansion of Summit Place, incentive housing zone.
I believe the representatives are waiting in the wings outside and will let them know their time is now.
Okay. May proceed.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Len Fasano of Fasano, Ippolito, Lee, and Florentine, representing the applicant, and Steve from Milone and McBroom representing the applicant as well. This has been a long evening for all of you, so we'll make this relatively short. As you may remember, several years ago, we came with a plan in which to do affordable housing in the Summit Place area up on Branford Hill. We had 2 existing buildings, and then there was an empty lot, and we proposed to do all 3 at once, to do residential structure, which would include affordable housing. This board said, well, what if we did this piecemeal, and suggested we come in with 2, see how that goes, and if we had those substantially filled, and we showed that it was working, then we would go for the 3rd. Those 2 were filled, or are filled, the affordable part of it, as well as the market rates. So now we want to do the 3rd, which is the raw land that hopefully is shown over there. The issue is, once all 3 are sort of done, then the state will look at this as an affordable housing project, and the town will be eligible to receive $50,000 plus $2,000 per permit from the state, as I understand it. You shaking your head no?
Actually, our incentive housing development regulation, it's actually filed with the state, so it was never, I can't remember why, it was before I was here, I don't know why, what reason, but it's not actually part of the home program. So we don't get the money, even if the money was available, which I understand, it's difficult. I don't know if they ever funded the final part of it, but, so we're not actually eligible to do that, unfortunately.
Would you just have to refile? I think they're going to refund the program. Would you have to refile if they could you file if they do you know?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I'll look into that, yeah.
But I think there is an effort to fund the program. But
That'd be great.
at any rate, under the initiative of affordable housing, which everyone is looking for, and acceptable housing, there's a criteria that you have to be within a vicinity of a bus line, which it is, And so we propose to do our third phase, and Steve will talk about the details of the engineering of what it's going to look like and how many units. Steve?
Thank you. For the record, Steve Ditzko, professional engineer with Malone and McBroom, with offices in Cheshire and New Haven. The first plan you have in front of you just shows the vicinity of the parcel. It's a 3.2 acre parcel on the south end of Summit Place, and it's a vacant, undeveloped parcel with vegetation on it. And the surrounding uses are to the south, the Jefferson Woods Apartments, to the east. You have a town open space, and to the west, residential development. Under the proposed plan, which shows under the proposed plan, it shows the two buildings that were converted to housing under the previous application and currently do have the incentive housing overlay on them, 35 units in there. The proposed plan conceptually for the remaining parcel, Lot 3, the 3-acre parcel to the south, shows a single building. We anticipate that will contain 56 apartment units, and there's a detached clubhouse, which you see there. We anticipate handling the stormwater on the east side of the property. Largely, the property is served by sanitary sewer, public water, and all the other utilities. Summit Place is fully built out, even with sidewalks and streetlights. And the nice thing about bringing this property online with the two adjoining ones is that they can jointly use the clubhouse. That'll be for joint use of all the units, all 91 units, and as well as a playground that was built as part of the second parcel here. So this playground. And we anticipate developing the site aesthetically, screening it on the perimeter from the adjoining uses, and then having a series of sidewalks so that all the properties can be connected to one another and also to the amenities. There's plenty of parking. As shown on this plan, the parking is in excess of that which is required for the unit count, and we will settle on some number of parking places as we get the plan fully developed, but that will be without a problem in excess of what the town requires. And that is the plan in its basic elements. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer those.
What's the grade doing from the circle towards the back of the property? Is it falling away?
Yeah, that's a
Or is
good
it
question.
falling?
Yeah, the grade coming off the back of the circle is pretty flat. So this section of the property is kind of a ridge. It falls off a little bit this way, and then there's a steeper fall on this side, down significantly to this area. And then the whole property does sit significantly higher than Jefferson Woods and these properties here. So it's kind of the end of a knoll coming off of the cul-de-sac.
All right. How does the back of the proposed building, is that drop off as you're getting to the parking lot in Jefferson Woods directly adjacent to the property line, or you sort of, doesn't go down that far, that fast, or?
Yeah, and I don't have all the contours on here, but the grade is relatively flat up here, and then it falls down to
Slightly, okay.
Jefferson Woods.
Okay.
Off the back, yeah.
Is there an opportunity to provide parking underneath the building to save on some of the pervious surface area?
Well,
given that there's a grade change front to back?
Not in this case. The grade change front to back is probably not anything that we could get the vehicle into around the back of the building. And you're dealing with a height restriction. So in this case, we can get 3 stories constructed and be under the 40-foot height limit, which is the height restriction in the underlying zone. And any of the impervious area on site, we will deal with that in accordance with the stormwater regulations. We'll have infiltration if we find good soils there, and deal with it that way.
So do you have a picture of the building? It sounds like you're doing a sloped roof then?
We do have some preliminary schematics from the architect, and, you know, the look of the building, if you've been out there, and if you remember what the buildings looked like prior to their conversion to residential, are substantially improved, very nice facades, and this building is meant to match those. And there's two images, basically the same. This is just kind of an expanded portion of the frontage, and it shows developing 3 stories with a bit of pitch roof, and we're still coming in under 40 feet. That's about 37 and a half feet.
How many bedrooms? What, 70 something, what'd you say, 70?
How many units?
73 units?
So 56 units proposed in this building, and we anticipate 12 efficiencies or studios, 26 one-bedroom units, and 18 two-bedroom units.
How many affordable?
Would be 20%.
20%?
The two that are up there, how long have they been occupied?
The two, how long
Yeah.
the building's been occupied?
Yeah, do you know? Or-
Alex, how long have they been occupied? Yeah, how long have they been occupied?
Since we started, and then fully occupied, we May, fully occupied.
Fully occupied by May.
Have there been any issues that anyone knows of, you know, complaints or anything?
We have a waiting list, actually, of people that like the property, want to get it.
They're
beautiful units.
How do we enforce the affordability part? Is there some compliance or certificate that you guys said that, yes, we're in compliance with? How do we ensure that you're, you know, renting it to the people that qualify for the 80% income? I mean, what's the mechanism for that?
I don't know if there is a mechanism that you all have. I think the last time it was approved was that you guys would inspect from time to time, as I understood it. But I don't think there was an official.
Yeah, I think as part of it, there's a plan, I can't remember what it's actually called, where it
Was there an
requires how
afford-
you have
if
to
it-
go through and evaluate
Affordability.
potential tenants of the affordable units and the, yeah.
If that's the question, we do that, you didn't qualify to.
And you have that paperwork, so we could, yeah.
If it were 830G, which one I'm used to, which I don't like, but you're required to do an affordability plan. And I think as part of the affordability plan, there's some sort of certification or something that you need to do to ensure that you're that you're keeping up with it or whatever, because otherwise, how do we know you're doing it? So,
I think similar documents were filed at the time of the conversion of the first 2 buildings, and certainly it would be the same type of document for this. I just don't know offhand exactly what it was, but we went back and forth on that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
We'd be happy to identify, we know which units they are with respect to the first 2 buildings, and we'd be happy to supply the members of those units and verify to you, and do the same with the new building.
We did get copies of the deed restrictions, so those were provided to Planning and Zoning Department by your partner.
Is the, just sort of reality, what is the rent at the 80% level now? I don't know, do you know?
The one bedrooms are in the 12 to 1300, then you have to take out a utility allowance. So the net, I think the one bedroom is in 1,050 or something like that. And then the efficiencies are about 150 less, and then the 2 bedrooms are probably about 150 more.
Sure. I don't know, I'm just, again, more curiosity. How less is, what's the market rate for an efficiency?
Our market rate rentals in that same property are considerably more, $200 or $300 more. And we're, like I said, we're 100% occupied there.
Right.
So those who are using the affordable are getting a complete value.
Mm-hmm.
How do you evaluate the applicants for affordable? Do they need to have jobs, or have you denied people who aren't showing enough income?
So they have to make under a certain amount, depending on the bedroom count, how many people, or how many applicants in that unit. And then we still all have the ability to verify that, and then they still have to pass our screening for credit and criminal. So they still have to make a certain amount, make nothing, because then they won't pass the credit.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, is, you know, how those limits are shown.
There's
a window.
A window, yeah.
Yeah, I guess our regs say that you do have to do an affordability plan that it's analogous to the 830G ones. It's referenced in here, so whatever, I'm sure you'll do whatever it says. You're supposed, administrator shall file annual report to the commission certifying compliance with the regulations.
The area is, it's a good place to put a complex like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know, there was some, isn't it abutting some single-family residential down on the left side there?
That's way down low.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll have some screening or something, I don't know, who's going to complain about this? That's what I'm
Those
wondering.
individual property owners might.
Yeah, those,
When we did these, we looked at that issue, and I don't know, you may or may not recall, some people showed up
right,
at that first one,
right,
and then saw what was there, and then didn't care anymore, because they thought they were adding stuff back here. But this topography is such that it is so much of a difference that where you're gonna put the building, it is of no import. And when we did the first application, so this would be the second time, but the first application, nobody showed up from.
yeah. I wouldn't think it would be Jefferson or whatever it is.
I thought it was
whatever.
from Thistle
It's-
Meadow or whatever that road is.
It's the single families
Well, it's
over
on the
there.
west side, yeah.
Family,
Yeah.
I remember one or two people showed
Yeah.
up here,
Yeah.
saw the plan, and didn't even stay for the hearing.
Yeah, there was somebody who I think was concerned, but also on that side, I think it was a pretty substantial line of vegetation.
Yes.
And I believe the previous plan enhanced that quite a bit, so you're talking about a residential district buffer that, you know, is fairly substantial in terms of what's planted in it. So that would need to be extended further to the south along that side of the property line.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Is that property all the same elevation as those other two buildings, or it dropped down? I think
It drops down,
quite
it drops
bit
down quite a
at least
bit.
To the east. or
It
to the
does.
west, rather.
Yeah, it does.
A lot on that side.
This is lower than all the development.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
about in the back, on the south side?
And then out the back, it falls down also.
Yeah.
to the county.
So is there gonna be some kind of a tree buffer in the back on the south side, if this thing gets built?
Yeah.
Good distance.
There needs
So
to
the
be,
reason I'm
yeah.
saying, because you got this big building, 40 feet high, up on a very high elevation, and everything from down below looks up, it looks like it's, you know.
Towering over it.
The lighting and everything, it's gonna, might stick out quite a bit.
Yeah, we plan to heavy this up. We can even do some study sections as to how that would look from the adjacent elevations and make sure that we've got screening in there, we're taking into account the elevation. Like our planner said, this buffer was already heavy here. We added a lot of planting to it because the residential buffer, and this is already, tremendous row of evergreens blocking here. We would anticipate to do the same here.
So what we're kind of doing is sort of getting a feel, if the commission says, generally speaking, we have some concerns when you come in for the real public hearing, we like to kind of see what that profile looks like. We can concentrate on that profile, so we're trying to feel out what the concerns will be, so when we come in, we'll be able to address those concerns. So to your point, sir, we will look at this issue with respect to that.
Yeah, I guess just, leave some of those bigger trees back there to block some of that lighting and whatever that's going on, and the building itself too, from that side. From looking down, because I'm envisioning someone low, looking up. You're looking up, probably just 20, 30 feet elevation difference or more.
Yeah.
That's up high over there, that's all very high in comparison to the rest of the surrounding.
We'll take care of
I'd
it.
actually like to see a cross-section,
Mhm.
but don't exaggerate the vertical scale, because I think that makes it hard to.
Okay, yep, good point.
I could see where you possibly could use some tall foundation plantings that would maybe soften up the sharpness of some of the...
I think it's a function
Think
of
that
the
would make sense?
distance, so when you see it at a one-to-one scale, you're going to be
No, I
able
know
to
what you're saying, yeah.
actually physically draw a sight line to see where the trees are going to start to give you the protection against the building.
Yep.
So, it may be possible to, I don't know, reconfigure the parking lot or move it up higher, or,
I was thinking maybe some plantings on the edge of the building to sort of step it into the landscape a little bit, too.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah,
Putting
all
the
right.
parking underneath the building. I mean,
Yeah, that would be
you
great.
could move that building over the parking potentially and gain another 50, 60 feet away from that line.
That would be-
And,
that'd be
you're
great.
still, you've got half the grade, so if you average the grades, you might be able to do it with the height, or maybe there's I'm not sure how the height, you had some language about, what constitutes the top of the building with,
Yeah, it's the last
air
question for the
conditions and
night.
things like that, but
Right.
it might make for a better project for the neighbors. And then just to go over the other butters, the one to the right is Branford Hall with all that parking?
Branford Hall
And that's all their parking?
Right.
And then the one to the left, is that a storage facility?
A self-storage facility, yeah.
Okay.
And is that a path off on the open space that I'm seeing on the aerial? Yeah.
That is, that's the limit of wetlands
Oh, okay.
on the open space.
To the right of it,
So wetlands are this
that way.
Yeah. What are you proposing for that green area as you're adjacent to the stormwater detention on the, I guess, the east side of the plan? Yeah.
Just lawn,
Okay.
for general use, and
All right.
we can certainly, we did put some picnic tables over here. That's the type of thing we could do over here.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to maybe vegetate the edge of it. Just a little concerned about, it must drop off fairly significantly there, or will, once the detention basin's in place. They're down there, yeah, as you go into the right, yeah. As you're going down towards the east to the right.
Yeah, so this is already a significant
Drop,
off
right.
that edge of the parcel. And what we'll do is we'll use that to our advantage and do our stormwater below that, and
Yep.
the significant grade change that we picked up here, one wall, maybe two.
Okay.
And we can separate that from.
So there's no significant drop-off, kids and whatever, and, things like that.
Anything else?
I'm just thinking, I know it's a little more money, but it would be potentially nice to, can you handle the stormwater and galleys under the parking instead of clearing vegetation to do an open water quality treatment? I don't know what the cost benefit, the feasibility is of that, but, it seems like you're abutting an open space and you're going to have to do quite a bit of tree clearing. It might be nice to try to protect the slope and protect the trees if and I don't know what whether there's rock or anything to create those steps.
Yep.
If you can
Yeah.
do the galleys under the parking lot, that might
Help.
alleviate some of the clearing.
We've begun to study that. We'll likely have a combination of the two in order to deal with that. And the vegetation that's there is not, it's really not any type of vegetation that you would, leave. It's a lot of scrub and briars and things like that.
So was that once cleared and now it's going through first
Yeah.
stage growth kind of
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, it's pretty rugged right now.
I know as part of the original approval, there was, where there were missing places in the sidewalk that was taken all the way down to the Route 1. But there's a couple of pieces the town engineer mentioned up along the cul-de-sac where it's sort of fallen into disrepair, and I think some of that is brick sidewalk that's not really easily maintained. And I think pieces along the frontage of the two buildings that were redone were replaced and fixed. There's a couple of streetlights and those kinds of things. So that's something he asked me to mention as things he would hope could be addressed as part of this.
That's on the existing buildings?
No, it's on the existing cul-de-sac, on the frontage right along this piece of property, which is different than, the improvements didn't continue all the way around because you didn't need to take them all the way around with the other project. So,
Yeah, there is existing sidewalk there in the right of way.
Yeah, it's just sort of bad shape.
Pavers, and some of them are displaced. So
Yeah.
that can easily be cleaned up as part of developing the property.
Okay. And there are design standards, so I really haven't gotten into it outside of seeing the graphic, which seems to, as a concept, address it, but there are detailed requirements here, just to point that out, that should be looked at and reflected in the final application that's made.
Okay, great, thank you. I think anything else? I think we're all set then. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, how we doing? It's getting
I'm a night owl.
No kidding. Goodsell Point Marina. Hope this is very quick.
You
Sorry.
waited all this time. We're not going to get in
I
this
warned
due
them.
process.
Yeah, sure.
We can be quick, there's no opposition, we can vote for that part.
Oh, this is a submission.
Is it one? Yeah, I think, yeah, that was your idea. That was a good idea.
Oh, you're putting the fun ones away.
So first of all, thank you very much for the chance to inform you of the value. Sal Maritoli, Oakwood Development. I want to talk about a property that we think is a very beautiful piece of property that has fallen into disrepair, Goodsell Point Marina. I don't know if you've been down there lately, but Mr. Bartlett's illness over the years, it's really gone downhill. So we've got abandoned structures, we've got abandoned homes, pipes. The marina has not been operating for several years. And I used to keep a boat there 40 years ago when it was going full tilt and it was always full. And so we'd like to take this marina and turn it into what we hope you will agree will be something special. Bring the marina back to life, completely rehab what's here, build a new service building, clubhouse that goes along with the marina property, and then as a PDD build 16 detached homes on the property.
You need a microphone.
They're giving us the,
Yeah.
trying to get you to use the microphone for the TV. It's all on BCTV.
Did you get any of that?
I got it. You need to show the, you can't see the
That's what you're,
camera.
Jim, you're in the way, it looks like.
You need to turn to the.
So again, it's moving from this present condition to this vision for what we think that property can be, with a marina restored, with a clubhouse building, with a service building, and 16 homes on the site.
How big is the property?
Property is about, it's two properties, Joe. We're buying the Goodsell Point property and the neighboring property.
Which
And,
way?
Yeah, can I see it on the site plan?
It's actually 5 small pieces together.
What's the total
Can I see the
acreage?
site?
You have it.
Acreage is,
Which neighbor are you talking about?
it's about 5 acres.
I think there's a house on both sides. Right? Is there, you're talking about a house?
It's John Ferenza's house.
Friend's house, that's what I'm talking about. Was it his house?
Oh, blades and guns, that's interesting.
There's,
Why don't you talk to that one, that's pretty.
yeah, it's hard to see on
There's a very big
That's a good
house way down the end of it, at the end of the road too.
If
at
you're
the dead end.
familiar with the property, so Goodsell Point wraps around the river,
Yeah,
and then there is moving west toward the Branford Yacht Club side.
but there's a house
There's a
right,
single house right there.
Two
Will acquire-
houses.
Just one. There's 2 houses on the Goodsell property.
right.
Bartlett House, the red house.
One in,
There's
More.
one to the east of that,
East of
which is
that.
abandoned.
that's right.
And then there is, next to the Bartlett neighbor,
is a residential piece, and we're acquiring that. And then the next piece is the marina, that's the old Bruce and Johnson's, what they refer to as the North Yard.
What's the zone?
So where's Harbor Street?
It's currently zoned R3.
R3, which is minimum what? What's the minimum lot size?
Minimum lot size is 15,000, we're about 220,000.
Okay.
So even if you looked at these as, 16 units, and you'd be more than the 15,000 per unit. But, we're thinking that this is a PDD because of the mix of uses here. There would still be the marina use, there'd be a residential use. Theoretically, most of these people would have boats in the marina. But we're still in the conceptual stage here. We haven't done the survey yet, but.
How did you determine how much parking to provide for the marina?
So this plan shows 173 spaces without the spaces for each house. And you could fit 2 cars in each driveway. So theoretically, these people would have boats here, so they'd be using some of the slip. So I think, there's 183 slips that were active at one point here. It's usually 1 per, so we think that with the mix, that we'd have more than the 180, about
There's 183 slips, how many houses?
16.
Then you're showing how many parking spaces?
These are not owners. You're not splitting the land into lots. This is condominium.
It would be like condos, correct. Yeah, the individual condos look like houses.
Yeah.
And how many parking spaces are you showing?
We're showing 173 right now, not counting the ones in front of the houses. So that could be another 32. Really.
Yeah.
Jim, only we said does automatically you own if you own a house, does automatically you own a slip too?
I think it would be an option, right?
It's an option.
Yeah. But theoretically, kind of the draw to live down there was if you're boating.
Yeah, like Silver Point, they have the houses in there.
Yeah, Silver Point's like that.
Like that, yeah.
There's more slips than houses.
I mean, one of the things, just my reaction, one of the things when you think of a PDD, you don't do it just to increase the density. In other words, particularly for residential density, you don't do it just so you can get more than you could as of right. So I'm just kind of wondering how this fits out if you had a marina use. And one reason you do want a PDD is to help in the configuration, whatever, so you're not having all the rigid stuff and you can plan it better. But you wouldn't do it PDD just in order to get more density. So that's sort of what I'm thinking of. If you had a marina and in an R3 zone, what could you get in as of right without doing anything? And how does that compare to what you're doing now? That's sort of what I'm thinking now. Maybe there's, you can vary from that, but that's sort of my base point.
If we did just the acreage divided by the underlying zone, we get about 15.
15 acres with
15 homes.
15 homes
15 homes.
with no marina?
We're asking for 60.
Right. With a marina too? Would you get the marina and 15 homes?
So that's interesting. I mean, if you had to take the area that will be predominantly used by the marina out of it, no, the area would be cut in half more or less. So.
Right. So you would get,
It'd be much less.
I'm just saying, you get a marina and 7 homes or something,
But I
right?
believe the plan here is that one entity would own the whole thing and
Right.
maintain it all.
Right, no,
And the, like Jim said, it's a different situation because the marina's waterbound.
right.
So the marina's not taking really any land other than parking. And frankly, we need the count because this is an undertaking.
Right.
Bring that marina back is an undertaking, so.
Yep.
We really, this thing, we want to make it work, but we're going to need some of it. We're going to need this to kind of offset the cost we're going to incur to get that marina back in shape. There's a lot to do.
Yeah. There is a, CAM component to this you think about. I mean, the marina, of course, provides water-dependent use. And hopefully the residential development generates enough cash, and like you said, the whole thing works together. Just sort of wondering the worst-case scenario with maybe the marina, once you get it all up and going, it goes, and then, maybe it doesn't work, I don't know. At some point, should that happen, how would you address the water-dependent use part of it? Maybe a question the commission may want to ask, find out. Is there a plan B for that? Is there, the marina goes away as a public access walkway or something, and, you develop a couple more houses or something, I don't know what that would look like. Just wondering about that and how much of a marina is going to be there, too. I mean, you're going to have a full-service marina, and, because I think you weren't talking about off-season boat storage, correct? That was not going to be part of this?
No storage here.
No storage, okay, so that's not part of
But
it.
there is a maintenance facility if they had to
Okay.
pull a boat to fix it, put it back, kind of thing.
Okay.
It wouldn't be, but there's no plan to store boats. Part of the attraction here is the view, and you wouldn't want to be living
Obscure
here looking
that,
at
right.
little boats in the wintertime, so.
I'm a little concerned, I understand the need and the counts. I'm a little concerned with the amount of parking against the shoreline. I almost want to push the parking towards the entrance road and have a drop-off so that you could provide more green space, more of a buffer, so that you're not getting those solvents. I know you're going to do, you're going to grade it away, but, typically it's nicer to not have so much impervious surface at the water's edge. And, I would love just to see that edge opened up and greened and push some of the parking to the back. And I personally, I know it may not be in the zone, but I would be open to another type of building configuration to get the count to financially make it viable if it created more space on the site to increase the greening and the access open along to the river front.
Just to kind of think out loud what we've been talking about, the areas up in here would get paved in front of the houses to try to keep dust down. Down here would be mostly, crushed granite, like just typical around here, crushed sheet shells. This seawall needs to be repaired somewhat. We talked about the cap being a sidewalk, the cap of the seawall. But, parking up behind the seawall is pretty typical of most of the marinas around here. And folks are taking stuff out of their cars, bringing it to the boats, kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, that's
why I suggested the drop-off and not parking. Because, it's an opportunity to open it up to the public, the views, and, I just think it would be nicer to really have a greener edge along that marina front, both for the use of the clubhouse and
Think of your marinas here.
Well, I understand.
And most of them are a stone parking lot and boat slips. This already, Marcy, will be quite a bit more a little heavier landscaping, I certainly envision this to be much nicer than just about more like a Branford yacht club. That kind of landscaping, that kind of feeling, as opposed to what we see, your marinas. But most of the marinas will have a gravel parking lot. As Jim said, gravel here, paved here, and most of them have parking right up to the seawall. But this will be much heavier landscape than just about any marina that we have in town.
I just sort of see that, you're walking onto the boats anyway, do a drop-off, and then move the car so that you can create more opportunities for the users both on the boat, on the site, you've got that, it's the tip, it's such a gem, it just seems a shame to me to have that much parking. You have an opportunity to not do what's always been done and to find a creative solution, if you had maybe did, duplexes, maybe you can save space to get some parking closer in that top portion or something. I know it's a conceptual plan, that's why I'm pushing it a little bit.
It's conceptual, and because it's informal, let's talk.
Yeah. You've also got only limited access points, I think, to where someone would unload something and take it out to a slip. So there's the areas where, you go off the shore towards the slips and keep parking along there, but you could add some more green in between it, sort of mix it up so it would address what you're talking about. And
Well, I would kind of like, I'm not sure what the elevations are for the flood zone and all that, but it would be nice to have that clubhouse on the water, maybe have more of the ones along the front, have some higher-end homes, or do a structure that's a mixed, multi kind of approach that's not going to be so massive that it's offensive, but you've got some big houses in that area that you could do some things where you had some, get some units in there so that you're really maximizing the view shed and the pedestrian access along the river, and it kind of keeps the parking I'm just sort of thinking market, like even the maintenance building, like push it back and get more uses in front.
The concern that we have, Marcy, with that is that we really think that the market here
The
is
single
not
family.
to create Sylvan Point.
No, I'm not suggesting Sylvan
Not
Point.
to attach any of them, but to keep them. We had such success at Riverwalk by having those things detached, and we have friends who have attached them, and they just don't work. They create legal problems, because all of a sudden two walls are touching. There's a whole set of condominium law that kicks in at that point. Whereas when we do these detached, like we did there, it was smooth, it was easy, everybody's responsible for their own home. So that was kind of, just so that you kind of understand the thinking behind why we laid it out this way.
No, I understand.
The original, the architect did design large buildings.
Well, I'm not proposing like an Anchor Reef. I'm
Yeah.
proposing maybe like a different type of housing,
We really pushed back on that to try to get these to be more like a Riverwalk, where they were detached homes, so that an association maintained everything, but you were responsible for your home. That formula worked really well. As soon as we start attaching them, there's a whole set of problems that kick in. With Connecticut condominium law, frankly. So that's why it was laid out like this, and I'm all for making this as beautiful as possible. I don't know if we could give up those parking spaces there, because then we're not going to have enough parking for the number of
Well,
slips that are
I
there.
understand
The whole
you
thing
to count, yeah.
The whole thing has to work so that financially it all works.
Yeah, no,
I mean, at the end of the day, it is a marina, right? So like pushing the maintenance building farther away from the water is really.
Well, I kind of wanted to move the common facility closer to the water, and have that be.
Fills on this would be a story up, so. Yeah, we'll certainly get the.
Slip parking underneath it or something then, and save the parking that way and do it, deck it down.
So I got two questions, I guess. One, are you planning on bringing in sewers? There's no sewers there.
No, there is no sewers there. I have talked to the town engineer a couple times. A couple of concepts kicking around. We thought that the WPCA would be amenable to some sort of conversation if we could provide access to the other houses on the street, so that if in fact any of the other ones septic systems fail or whatever, they would have an opportunity to connect if they needed to.
Right now, it ends at Branford Yacht Club.
Yacht Club.
So
it's quite a distance.
Quite a distance. Now, there's an opportunity here, because there's a fair amount of talk about low-pressure force main. As lots of towns, Jim, you know it better than I do.
Yeah, that's one option. So basically, the two options are essential pump station or low-pressure force main. And the town currently has a low-pressure force main out to bid down on Highland, Riverview area, down at Short Beach. Everybody that attaches has their own small little pump station, and they pump into a common force main. The other option would be a central pump station where we'd provide some sort of gravity sewer to the road, and it would have to be fairly low here, because there's a couple low spots in the road, actually near the yacht club, pretty low there. And then it would be basically rebuild it, WPCA maintains it later, kind of thing. But they would be, for that to happen, we'd have to, again, provide access for everyone on the road to connect in the future if they need to. It's the only way that they're really going to allow it.
But the other situation is too, that road is extremely narrow. How much land does the town own as far as that road? That road is barely 20 feet wide.
Yeah, that I don't
The right-of-way
know.
is only 33 feet there.
It's 3 rods kind of thing.
So, I mean, that road needs to be widened to accommodate, you're adding 16 plus. The marina, the marina was there before, but the marina was never active like this one's gonna be. Because this is gonna be all
We're
brand
adding 13. There were 3 homes that were occupied. We're adding 13.
new. All right, but either way, the road needs to be widened at least a little bit somewhere. I mean, for two-lane traffic, it's,
And that's why I say between, a force main and widening, because we knew that would come up. It's one of the reasons why you say you need some density here.
I'm sure before the end of
Or else-
this,
Or else it just doesn't work. I mean, we looked at it.
if you're gonna put sewers in, you're gonna widen the road, because that doesn't make sense not to. I mean, you're digging up the road already. Now you gotta extend it. It has to be widened a little bit, at least accommodate, I don't know, 25 to 30 feet. I don't know. I don't think there's more than 20 feet there in some places.
yeah, I
It
agree.
narrows down when you get down to the marina.
Yeah.
It's not bad, actually, all the way to the, old Bruce, the Bruce and
And
Johnson.
almost up to the driveway, Bruce and
Right.
Johnson, but it's
Right.
actually narrow there too. It widens in front of the yacht club, Branford Yacht Club, it's not bad. And then, from that point on, from where their boatyard is,
And
down,
and I suspect before the end of this, when the fire marshal gets involved, we're going to need to anyway, because he's going to want better access to the end.
Oh yeah, we're gonna need to get a weightless pontoons.
Outriggers.
They gotta have those extensions out there for that fire.
So,
And that's why all of these pieces need to fall into place. We need some density, we need the marina slips in order to make this work, because we're going to incur some costs, getting the marina back in shape and getting that sort of, we've got water on site.
I don't know how you, what needs to be done there, I don't know how you're gonna come up with a profit. To be honest, I'll tell you the
There's a lot.
truth. You're talking a lot.
and that, Marcy, that parking count had to do with the slips that are actually existing.
Well, yeah, no, I
That were already
understand that.
permitted
Yeah,
before.
yeah, no, I understand that.
Would you
Are
be,
those
re-
two-story homes? How
Would
many
you be
square feet
re-
are the homes?
About 2,200.
As a two-story
Two-story.
for, any not qualified by act of adult or anything like
The
that?
homes will be not active adult. The homes are going to be very similar to the one that we did at 48 Civil, that one with the orange door on it, pergola out there.
Garage under,
Yeah.
to save space?
Well, Harry, what were you saying?
you planning on reactivating all the 183 slips? Because wouldn't that need there's some that's silted up? I mean, that's another cost too, is dredging.
About 120 slips that we can start using
Right now, okay.
now. And then there are another 50 or so that are going to require some dredging. And then there are some that the marina had always had 175 operating, and then there were slips that were permitted off of what they refer to as the balloon dock.
All right.
And there's another 8 slips there.
I think so.
Did Don Baloo do
Yeah.
that?
I believe it was a relation.
The hydrologist?
Yeah.
Because it looks like there's some sensitive, sort of fragmity areas on that end. I mean, are those docks on the right, or are those, pedestrian opportunities for the public to get and interact with the water?
Well, you got to go pretty far out on
Yeah,
that
the
end to
cam
get to the
question,
slips, right?
Yeah, I mean, these would be docks. I suspect before the end of this, like I said, the cap for the wall would end up being a sidewalk, so you'd be able to walk all the way around here.
It'd be nice to have some green on the other side of it, some trees, then the parking.
Yeah, but if you plant trees along the edge, you're blocking the view of the water.
You can do low trees. So you have other stuff elevated.
Now, the two rows of houses that are there, what's the distance about in the middle? The two backyards I mean.
In between here?
Side yards.
Yeah, from the back of that house to the back of the other house, in the second row.
In between here?
Yeah, in the middle.
Yeah, I think we have about 60 feet.
60?
Yeah.
20-foot driveway can fit a car, 20-foot road.
But that's all backyard, right?
It's front yard.
No, that's like
Those are the front yards and the
Those
driveways.
would be the fronts of the house, right? So you come in and then go into your house.
Was that a road
Either
there?
way.
Yeah,
Driveway?
that's
Yeah,
a
this is the
driveway.
driveway here. So the
Parking
driveway
is
come
gonna
in,
be in the middle?
you go either way,
Well, you
and
can
then...
park
Park
your
in the middle,
driveway or your
yeah.
house, so you
Yeah.
can park under the house.
Yeah, so from outside the property, you really wouldn't see that much.
That's
You-
not flat over there.
From the water,
You got a
no.
hell of an elevation.
Yeah, there's some elevation. This is the high area, and it definitely drops off. This is lower
Yeah.
for sure.
We'll have to retain here.
Or in the middle, where the parking is or whatever, that's sloping down already.
Step the lots.
Yeah,
and
like
put
I said,
some
we haven't
trees.
done the survey yet. There's definitely some challenges here.
Okay.
I would really hope that you give more to that walkway around the tip and, let people come down and use that from a public standpoint and go back out. I think that's really important for
Well,
CAM. And I think we've, as a town, not
What
developed
if there
that.
was a way for us to allocate some spots here? And, this dock here that runs out, it might be possible to even put a little structure up. It's a big dock, and that dock's, it's the one thing there that's in great shape. And maybe even put a little bench or a little gazebo out there.
I think too often what we're seeing from CAM is we'll just sort of enter in and give one little access point, and that's not really what I think is the intent of CAM. I think the intent of CAM is to open up the shoreline and provide shared use in a quasi-public-private situation, and there's lots of ways to do that, to still create the separation and privacy that you want for the club.
Yeah.
And I think you just need to be creative about it, because I can think of solutions in my head, and I haven't seen them. And I'm not talking about this application, I'm talking about other applications that I've been very disappointed by and haven't seen happen, and so I would just kind of, I think that's one good idea, but that's important to me, personally.
Yeah.
I would be disappointed if you all thought that that wasn't
I think that's beautiful.
a pretty nice turn from that.
I think you've got extra
But there's only
pavement in
gonna be-
front,
but
and
there's only going to be
I,
so much we're going to be able to do, even with the 16 homes.
Well, maybe, the hour is pretty late. My suggestion might be to extend this with another conceptual, informal discussion possibility, if you guys want to look at some of the discussion's been tossed around tonight and tweak it, gives you a chance to investigate a little more without developing a full-blown site plan for submittal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the hour is getting late, I'll
Yeah.
emphasize that.
We've sort of gotten the nod. I think they need to change the tapes 11 o'clock. We're running out of room or something on them, so.
Okay, well, you've gotten some feedback.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks. Okay, definition of building height.
Yeah, we have our last question of the night. So you should have the one excerpt from Section 2, the definitions at the top box. Questions arisen, I think, at the ZBA level, in looking at an application for that would allow construction of a Hampton Inn in place of the Branford Motel to go ahead.
did we talk about this last time?
No, this is a whole different question.
Oh.
So this question has to do with the wording average pre-existing, pre-development grade. And what does pre-development grade mean? Does it mean the grade before the proposed development? Or does it mean the grade before any development on a property? So there is some thinking that, some quarters, that it does mean pre-development before a property was developed at all. So you're going back to when it was before colonial days, when no one had touched the land, or changed it in any way. So I think what I understand has been the use of the term previously is that we're going back to the last approved use. And if you're going to propose changing it, then you're not talking about a post-fill situation to existing additions. You're talking about existing additions on a property when an application is conceived. I don't know what the commission's take is on that, but.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Makes sense to me. rather than going back to what it was in Christopher Columbus.
Whatever Chuck said.
I think you're talking about getting a measurement from where the finished grade is, from the building that they're building, is that what you're saying? Or,
Well, it's how you determine the average. So you take, for example, there would be no way to do it. I mean, you'd have to get contours of the property as it existed before an application came in and say, okay, we're going to measure from that average where that grade touches the perimeter of the building, come up with an average number, and then it's 40 feet above that. Rather than you get to adjust the property and then you go up to 40 feet.
I think it's
Yeah.
fine to adjust the property as long as you're not
Well, you don't allow
being
that.
like, let me fill it 8 feet to get out of the flood zone.
Well, you don't allow that. You don't allow
In other words,
to be based on post-development conditions. You have to say
I
pre-development.
want to have a view over everything, so I put a bunch of fill in and I make
That's
it.
what I'm saying.
40 feet
I'm not
above that.
saying that.
You
but-
don't allow that, right?
We don't allow, that's what that's intended to prevent, pre-development, so you can't artificially throw a bunch of stuff in, so all your taller your neighbors can say, oh, because after I put all the fill in, the bottom's here, and I can get way up here.
But if
That's
somebody,
what I think
But
yeah, but if somebody filled a lot in 50 years ago, you don't go back to 50
Right.
years or whatever, because that's the
But
way
if
it
you're
is now.
talking between, if you're off between a foot or something, I don't see the harm in using landscaping to create an interesting edge to.
Well, that could all be
make
done. It's
the
just a question of where you
numbers
measure the height from.
Yeah.
work. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. It's like,
So I'm taking it the consensus is it's pre-development, it's existing conditions where an applicant comes in. Basically, does this sound right? Okay.
Great.
Thank you for your 4 hours
Is there a
of
motion to adjourn?
dedicated time.
Yes, so done.
Halfway up.
Yes.
don't ask me to design, I'm gonna go all night.
Marsh, you got anything else to say, Marsh?
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.